I always thought our love story would end with us holding hands on a porch swing somewhere, watching grandchildren play in the yard as the sun set on our lives together. 25 years of memories, of building a life, of loving the same man. 25 years that crumbled in an instant with 12 simple words. I've fallen in love with someone else. I want a divorce. It's Emma. Emma, my sister. My younger sister. The room tilted sideways as my husband of 25 years, Michael, stood in our kitchen on a random Tuesday evening, destroying everything I thought I knew about my life. He didn't even have the decency to look remorseful as he said it, just stood there with that determined set to his jaw I'd once found so attractive. Now it just looked cruel. Emma? I repeated, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. My sister Emma? I didn't mean for it to happen, Olivia, he said, as if that somehow absolved him. These things just happen sometimes. These things don't just happen. Affairs don't just happen. Betrayal with your wife's sister doesn't just happen. I gripped the counter behind me, suddenly unsure if my legs would support me. The ceramic mug I'd been washing slipped from my fingers, shattering against the tile floor. I stared at the broken pieces, a wedding gift from Emma, ironically enough, and felt something inside me fracture along with it. How long? The question escaped my lips before I could stop it. Did I even want to know? Would more details make this nightmare any easier to bear? Michael shifted uncomfortably, suddenly unable to meet my eyes. 8 months. 8 months. While I'd been planning our 25th anniversary trip, while I'd been driving his mother to chemotherapy appointments, while I'd been helping Emma through her supposed breakup with some man she'd never actually introduced us to, I felt sick. Get out! I whispered, then louder, get out! Olivia, we need to talk about this reasonably. There are practical matters to, not tonight. My voice was deadly calm now, a stark contrast to the hurricane raging inside me. Tonight you get out of my house. Our house, he corrected automatically, and something in me snapped. I laughed, a hollow, unhinged sound that seemed to startle him. Is that really the hill you want to die on right now, Michael? Ownership semantics? He had the good sense to look uneasy. In 25 years, he'd never seen me truly angry. I'd always been the peacemaker, the reasonable one, the one who compromised. Well, I was done compromising. I'll stay at the Marriott downtown, he conceded, already reaching for his keys on the hook by the door. We can talk tomorrow when you've had time to process. Process. Like this was a business transaction gone wrong. Like finding out your husband and sister have been sleeping together for 8 months was something you could simply process overnight. Take whatever you need, I said coldly. But if you're not gone in 5 minutes, I'm calling everyone we know and telling them exactly why you're leaving. Starting with your mother. His face paled. Evelyn would disown him, and we both knew it. She'd always treated me more like a daughter than her own biological children. Finding out Michael had betrayed me, and with my sister no less, would break her heart. And despite everything, I didn't want to hurt her. Not yet, anyway. The front door closed with a quiet click that seemed to echo through the house. Our house. The home we'd saved for years to buy. The home where we'd planned to grow old together. I stood frozen in the kitchen until I heard his car pull out of the driveway, and then my legs finally gave way. I slid down against the cabinets, heedless of the broken ceramic shards around me, and let the tears come. They burned hot tracks down my face as sobs tore themselves from my chest, ugly and raw and unrestrained. How had I not seen this coming? Were there signs I'd missed? Moments when I should have known something was wrong? My mind frantically replayed the past 8 months, searching for clues, for warnings I should have heeded. The late nights at work, the sudden business trips, the way he'd started keeping his phone face down, his newfound password protection on all his devices, the decreased intimacy, the way Emma had started declining my invitations to family dinners. It had all been there right in front of me, and I'd been too trusting to see it. The betrayal cut deeper because of Emma. My sister, 4 years younger, always the prettier one, the wilder one, the one who took risks while I played it safe. But she was my sister. We'd shared secrets, clothes, dreams. I'd helped her with homework, bandaged her scraped knees, defended her against bullies. I'd introduced her to Michael at my college graduation. I'd asked her to be my maid of honor at our wedding. And now she'd taken the one thing that was mine. The pain was physical, a crushing weight on my chest making it difficult to breathe. I hugged my knees to my body, rocking slightly on the cold kitchen floor as the reality of my situation washed over me in cruel, relentless waves. 25 years, gone. My marriage, gone. My sister, gone. My future, gone. What was I supposed to do now? At 47, I'd spent more than half my life with Michael. Our lives were completely intertwined. Friends, finances, family, future plans, all of it built on the foundation of our marriage. A foundation that had just been revealed as nothing but sand. Eventually, the tears subsided, leaving behind a hollow emptiness and the beginning of a pounding headache. I pulled myself up from the floor, carefully avoiding the broken mug shards, and moved on autopilot to get the broom and dustpan. The simple act of cleaning up the broken pieces felt both necessary and futile. This mess could be tidied away. The mess of my life could not. I poured myself a large glass of the expensive Cabernet Michael had been saving for a special occasion and carried it upstairs to our bedroom. Our bedroom. The thought of sleeping in the bed we'd shared made my stomach turn, but I couldn't face the guest room tonight. I needed the familiar comfort of my own space, even if it was now tainted. Setting the wine on my nightstand, I caught sight of our wedding photo. We looked so young, so happy, so goddamn oblivious to what the future held. I turned the frame face down. Sleep didn't come easily that night. I tossed and turned, replaying Michael's words, imagining scenes between him and Emma that made me physically ill. When exhaustion finally pulled me under around 4 a.m, my dreams were chaotic and disturbing, leaving me no respite from the pain. I woke to the insistent buzzing of my phone. Sunlight streamed through the windows I'd forgotten to close, harsh and unforgiving. My head throbbed, my eyes felt swollen, and my mouth was dry from the wine and crying. 13 missed calls. 7 from Michael, 4 from Emma, 2 from my best friend Diane. 28 text messages. I couldn't bear to read them. Instead, I dragged myself to the bathroom and confronted my reflection. A stranger stared back at me, a woman with puffy eyes, blotchy skin, and the stunned expression of someone who'd just survived a catastrophe but hadn't yet processed the devastation. I splashed cold water on my face and brushed my teeth mechanically, trying to wash away the sour taste of betrayal. The phone started buzzing again as I stepped out of the shower. Michael's name flashed on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. What could he possibly say that would make any difference now? What explanation could justify what he'd done? What words could undo the damage? I wrapped myself in my robe and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. The numbness was setting in, a strange protective blanket between me and the pain. I knew it wouldn't last, but for now I welcomed it. My phone buzzed with a text. Michael, we need to talk. I'm coming over at noon. The audacity. The sheer entitlement. Coming over to the home he'd abandoned less than 24 hours after blowing up my life. Me, no. Michael, Olivia, be reasonable. We have things to discuss. Me, not today. Michael, I'll be there at noon with Emma. We want to explain. Emma. He was bringing Emma to my house. Our house. To explain. As if there could be any explanation that would make this situation acceptable. Something shifted in me then. The numbness receded, replaced not by the searing pain of last night, but by something colder, harder. A seed of anger took root, small but potent. Me. If either of you sets foot on my property today, I will call the police and report you for trespassing. Then I will call your mother, your boss, and every friend we have and tell them exactly what you've done. Try me. My hands were steady as I typed, my mind suddenly clear. I meant every word, and I knew he would recognize the steel in my message. Michael had never seen this side of me before. I'd never had reason to show it. The response took several minutes. Michael, I understand you're upset. We'll give you some space, but we need to talk soon about practical matters. Practical matters. The house, our investment accounts, the vacation property in Maine, the art collection we'd carefully curated over 2 decades, the life we'd built together, now reduced to practical matters to be divided and distributed. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Diane. Olivia? She answered on the first ring, her voice heavy with concern. I've been calling you all morning. Are you okay? Michael's leaving me. The words felt strange in my mouth, surreal. For Emma. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Emma? Your Emma? Your sister Emma? Diane's voice rose with each question. Yes, just saying it made me feel sick again. That motherfucker, she hissed. And that, I don't even have words for what your sister is. How long has this been going on? 8 months, apparently. Jesus Christ. Diane had been my friend since college, had been in my wedding, had spent countless evenings with Michael and me. She sounded as blindsided as I felt. What do you need? Want me to come over? Want me to slash his tires? Both are on the table. Despite everything, I felt a ghost of a smile touch my lips. Just come over, please. I'll be there in an hour with reinforcements. No, Ben, I said quickly, referring to her husband. I couldn't face anyone else yet, especially not another husband. Just you. Just me, she confirmed. And wine. Lots of wine. I hung up and forced myself to get dressed, to brush my hair, to at least attempt to look like a person whose life hadn't just imploded. It was a small act of defiance. I wouldn't let them reduce me to a weeping mess, even if that's exactly what I was on the inside. Diane arrived with not just wine, but also coffee, pastries, and a determined expression that told me she was ready for battle. She took one look at me and enveloped me in a fierce hug. You look like shit, she said as she pulled back. Thanks. But like, powerful shit. Like someone who's about to burn everything to the ground. She studied me for a moment. You're not just sad, are you? You're pissed. I'm both, I admitted as we moved to the kitchen. I keep cycling between wanting to curl up in a ball and cry until I die, and wanting to destroy him so completely he'll never recover. Diane nodded approvingly as she unpacked the bakery box. Fury suits you, Liv. I've never seen it before, but it looks good. I've never had reason for it before. I accepted the coffee she handed me. 25 years, Diane. 25 years and he throws it away for my sister. What are you going to do? I stared into my coffee, considering the question. What was I going to do? Curl up and accept the destruction of my life? Beg him to reconsider? Try to compete with my younger, more vibrant sister? None of those options felt right. I'm going to take everything, I said quietly, the words forming as the thought crystallized. He wants to leave me for my sister after I gave him the best years of my life? Fine. But he's not going to walk away with half of everything we've built. I'm going to make sure he regrets ever thinking he could discard me like I'm nothing. Diane's eyes widened slightly, then she smiled, slow and fierce. Now we're talking. And I know just who you need. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her contacts before placing a call on speaker. Carter, Finch, and Donahue, Rebecca Carter speaking. Becca, it's Diane Sullivan. I need a favor from my friend Olivia Hayes. Emergency divorce situation. Hayes? The woman's voice sharpened with interest. Married to Michael Hayes, CFO of Westridge Technologies? The very same, Diane confirmed. And it's a shit show. I have an opening at 3 today. Can she make it? Diane looked at me, eyebrows raised in question. I nodded. She'll be there. After disconnecting, Diane explained that Rebecca Carter was the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city, with a reputation for leaving wealthy, cheating husbands with nothing but regrets. She's expensive, Diane warned, but worth every penny. Money isn't going to be an issue, I said with newfound determination. I've managed our finances for 25 years. I know exactly where everything is, and I know things Michael doesn't think I know. Like the fact that he'd been quietly moving money into a private account for the past 6 months. I'd discovered it by accident 2 months ago while organizing our tax documents, but hadn't confronted him, assuming he was planning some elaborate surprise for our anniversary. Now the truth was painfully clear. He'd been preparing his exit strategy. Little did he know, I'd documented everything. That's my girl, Diane said, raising her coffee mug in a toast. Let's get you ready to see the shark. The rest of the morning passed in a blur as Diane helped me gather financial documents, take screenshots of accounts, and compile a list of assets. She encouraged me to eat, though food tasted like ash in my mouth. She forced me to shower again and put on what she called my power outfit, a sleek burgundy sheath dress I usually reserved for important work meetings. As the head librarian at the city's main branch, I didn't often need power outfits, but something about the structured fabric and clean lines made me stand straighter, helped me breathe easier. Diane was right. I needed armor for the battle ahead. My phone continued to buzz throughout the morning. Michael, Emma, even my mother, who must have heard something by now. I ignored them all, focusing instead on preparation. At 2:30, Diane drove me downtown to the imposing glass building that housed Carter, Finch, and Donahue. In the elevator, she squeezed my hand. Remember, she said quietly, you're not just fighting for assets. You're fighting for your dignity, for justice. Don't let misplaced loyalty or guilt weaken your resolve. I nodded, grateful for her fierce support. The elevator doors opened onto a sleek reception area where a polished young woman greeted us. Mrs. Hayes? Ms. Carter is expecting you. Rebecca Carter was not what I expected. Based on her reputation, I'd imagined someone older, harder, more obviously predatory. Instead, she was perhaps my age or slightly younger, impeccably dressed in a navy suit, with intelligent eyes that assessed me carefully as I entered her office. Mrs. Hayes, she greeted me, extending her hand. Please sit. Would you like water? Coffee? Water, please, I said, my throat suddenly dry. Rebecca nodded to her assistant, then turned her full attention to me as Diane and I settled into the chairs across from her desk. Diane mentioned this is an emergency situation, she began. Why don't you tell me what's happening and we can discuss how to proceed? I took a steadying breath. Saying it out loud still felt surreal. My husband of 25 years informed me yesterday that he's been having an affair with my sister for 8 months and wants a divorce. If Rebecca was surprised by the sister element, she didn't show it. She simply nodded and made a note on the legal pad in front of her. And this came as a complete surprise to you? Yes. I swallowed hard. I had no idea they were involved. Has he moved out of the marital home? Yes, last night. Good. And do you have children together? No. There had been pregnancies, 3 miscarriages in our first 5 years of marriage before we decided to stop trying. Another wound that suddenly felt fresh again. Had he wanted children with Emma? Was that part of the appeal? Rebecca continued with practical questions about finances, property, investments, prenuptial agreements, none, and the timeline of events. I answered mechanically, providing details about our assets, showing her the documentation I'd brought. When I mentioned discovering the secret account, her eyebrows rose fractionally. And you have evidence of this account? Yes. I pulled out printed statements I'd secretly made copies of. He's moved approximately $347,000 into it over the past 6 months. A small, satisfied smile curved Rebecca's lips, attempting to hide marital assets before filing for divorce. The courts take a very dim view of that. She reviewed the documents carefully, then set them aside and looked directly at me. Mrs. Hayes, may I call you Olivia? I nodded. Olivia, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be completely honest with me. What do you want out of this divorce? The question caught me off guard. What did I want? I hadn't had time to think beyond the immediate shock and pain. I don't know. What's fair, I suppose. Rebecca leaned forward slightly. Fair is subjective. Your husband wasn't concerned with fair when he began sleeping with your sister or when he started hiding assets. So I'll ask again. What do you want? Diane's words from earlier echoed in my mind. You're fighting for your dignity. For justice. I want what I'm entitled to, I said slowly, finding the words as I spoke. I've been with Michael for 25 years. I supported his career, managed our home, cared for his mother when she was ill. I've contributed equally to our financial success, even if my salary as a librarian was far less than his. I want recognition of that contribution, Rebecca nodded encouragingly. And. The anger that had been simmering all morning suddenly crystallized into something colder, more focused. I don't want him to walk away unscathed. I don't want him to simply trade me in for a newer model and keep living the comfortable life we built together. I want him to feel consequences. Now we're getting somewhere. Rebecca sat back, a gleam in her eye. Legally, Connecticut is an equitable distribution state, not a community property state. This means the court divides marital property equitably, which doesn't necessarily mean 50-50. Given the length of your marriage, your contributions to the household, and especially his attempts to hide assets, we have a strong case for you receiving well over half of the marital estate. She tapped her pen thoughtfully against her notepad. The infidelity alone won't significantly impact the financial settlement in this state, but it does give us leverage. Most men in your husband's position, wealthy, professional, reputation-conscious, want to avoid the public embarrassment of having their affair detailed in court documents that become public record, especially when that affair is with their wife's sister. The clinical way she discussed the affair made it easier to hear somehow. This wasn't about emotions now, it was about strategy. So what's our next step? I asked. First we file. Fast. Before he does. Rebecca pulled a legal pad toward her. Second, we secure your financial position immediately. I'm going to prepare emergency motions to freeze all joint accounts and prevent the disposal of any marital assets. Third, we document everything. His abandonment of the marital home, his hidden account, any communications about the affair. She looked up at me sharply. Has he asked you to keep the affair quiet? Particularly from his workplace or family? I nodded. He was very concerned about his mother finding out. Excellent. That suggests he's vulnerable to reputational pressure. She made another note. Olivia, I need to know, are you prepared for this to get ugly? Because if you want what you deserve, it very well might. Was I prepared? 24 hours ago, I was planning an anniversary surprise for the man I thought would grow old with me. Now I was sitting in a divorce attorney's office plotting financial warfare. I don't think I have a choice, I said quietly. He and Emma have already made it ugly. Rebecca nodded approvingly. Then let's proceed. My assistant will get you set up with paperwork, and I'll have those emergency motions filed by the end of business today. In the meantime, do not discuss financial matters with your husband. Do not agree to any informal arrangements. Do not move out of your home under any circumstances. And absolutely do not sign anything he puts in front of you without running it by me first. The meeting concluded with a flurry of paperwork, signatures, and a hefty retainer check that made my stomach clench despite my earlier bravado about money. As we left the office, Diane squeezed my arm supportively. You did great, she said. How are you feeling? Overwhelmed, I admitted, but determined. That's my girl. The drive home was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts. When we pulled into my driveway, I noticed Michael's car parked at the curb. My heart rate immediately spiked. Want me to stay? Diane asked, eyeing the car with undisguised hostility. I considered it, then shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. Call me immediately if you need me. And remember what Rebecca said. Admit nothing, agree to nothing, sign nothing. I will. Michael was sitting on the front steps, his normally immaculate appearance slightly rumpled. He stood as I approached. You're not supposed to be here, I said coldly. I know. I'm sorry. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I'd once found endearing. We need to talk, Olivia. I have nothing to say to you, please. 5 minutes. I considered simply walking past him into the house, but something made me pause. Perhaps it was morbid curiosity about what possible explanation he thought could justify his actions. 5 minutes, I agreed. But not inside. We sat on the porch steps, a careful distance between us. The physical space felt symbolic of the vast chasm that had opened in our relationship. Michael stared at his hands for a long moment before speaking. I know there's nothing I can say to make this better. I know I've hurt you in the worst possible way. Do you? My voice was flat. I didn't mean for this to happen. Emma and it wasn't planned. It just evolved. Evolved, I repeated, the word bitter on my tongue. Like a disease. He flinched. I still care about you, Olivia. I always will. You've been my best friend for half my life. The audacity of his statement hit me like a physical blow. Best friends don't betray each other. Best friends don't sleep with each other's siblings behind their backs. Best friends don't lie for 8 months straight while planning their exit. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Michael? Enlighten me. He sighed deeply. I fell in love. I didn't want to. I fought it. But it happened, and I can't change it now. So what do you want from me? Forgiveness? Blessing? What? I want us to handle this divorce like the reasonable adults we are, he said, his tone shifting to something more businesslike. I don't want a long, drawn-out legal battle that depletes the assets we've worked so hard to build. And there it was. He hadn't come to apologize or explain. He'd come to protect his money. I see, I said quietly. So you want a quick, quiet divorce where you get to ride off into the sunset with my sister and half of everything we've built together. That's not. Your 5 minutes are up. I stood, suddenly unable to bear being near him for another second. I've retained counsel. All communication about the divorce should go through my attorney from now on. His head snapped up, surprise evident in his expression. You've already hired a lawyer? It's been 1 day, Olivia. You've had 8 months to prepare, I countered. I'm just catching up. A flash of something. Worry? Fear? Crossed his face before he controlled it. Who did you hire? Rebecca Carter. I had the satisfaction of watching him pale slightly. Rebecca's reputation clearly preceded her. That's aggressive, he said carefully. She's known for scorched earth tactics. Is she? How interesting. I moved toward the front door. Please leave my property now, Michael. My lawyer will be in touch. Olivia, if you're still here in 2 minutes, I'm calling the police. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The cold certainty in my tone was enough. He stood slowly, as if still hoping I might change my mind. When I simply stared at him impassively, he finally turned and walked to his car. I waited until he drove away before entering the house and locking the door behind me. Only then did I allow myself to lean against the wall, breathing hard, fighting back the tears that threatened. I would not cry over him again. I would not waste any more emotion on a man who could discard 25 years of marriage so casually. Instead, I called Diane to report on the encounter, then settled at the kitchen table with my laptop. If I was going to fight for what was mine, I needed to be fully prepared. I spent the rest of the evening cataloging assets, passwords, account numbers, and property details. I searched for and found emails between Michael and Emma that made me physically ill, but I forced myself to save them as evidence. I documented the timeline of Michael's betrayal as best I could reconstruct it. It was nearly midnight when I finally dragged myself upstairs. The bed still felt too big, too empty, but the crushing grief of the previous night had been tempered by a new emotion: resolve. Michael and Emma thought they could simply discard me and continue their lives unimpeded. They were about to discover how wrong they were. The next morning dawned with a clarity I hadn't expected to feel so soon. I'd slept surprisingly well, my dreams mercifully blank. A text from Rebecca informed me that the emergency motions had been filed and served. All joint accounts were now frozen, and neither Michael nor I could dispose of any marital assets without court approval. I smiled grimly at my phone, imagining Michael's reaction when he discovered he couldn't access our joint investment account or sell the vacation property without my consent. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. The remainder of the week passed in a blur of legal consultations, document gathering, and avoiding calls from family members who'd begun to hear rumors. I hadn't yet spoken to my parents, unable to face explaining that their youngest daughter was sleeping with their eldest daughter's husband. That conversation would have to happen eventually, but not yet. Not until I'd strengthened my emotional armor. Michael attempted to contact me several times, his messages growing increasingly frustrated as he encountered the financial restrictions Rebecca had put in place. I forwarded each communication to her without responding. Emma called daily, leaving tearful voicemails begging me to talk to her, to let her explain. I deleted them without listening past the first few seconds. What explanation could possibly matter? What words could justify such a fundamental betrayal? A week after Michael's confession, Rebecca called with news. "Your husband's attorney reached out," she said without preamble. "They want to discuss settlement terms." "Already?" I was surprised. We'd barely begun the legal process. "This is good news," Rebecca assured me. "It means they want to avoid discovery in court. It means they're nervous." "What are they offering?" "The standard 50-50 split of assets, with Michael keeping the main property and you keeping the primary residence. He's also offering a lump sum of $100,000 in lieu of alimony." I laughed bitterly. After 25 years, after what he'd done, he thought that was fair. "What do you recommend?" I asked. "I recommend we counter with terms that make their offer look insulting by comparison," Rebecca said, a smile evident in her voice. "They're hoping you'll be too emotionally overwhelmed to fight. Let's show them otherwise." We spent the next hour crafting a counteroffer that demanded 70% of all marital assets, both properties, and substantial alimony based on the length of the marriage and the disparity in our earning potential. It was aggressive, perhaps even unrealistic, but as Rebecca explained, it set the tone for negotiations and established that I wouldn't be easily appeased. "They'll counter, of course," she said. "But we've established our position. You're not a doormat, Olivia. You're not going to slink away with whatever scraps he deigns to throw your way." After hanging up, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. For the first time since Michael's confession, I was taking active steps to protect myself, to fight for what I deserved. It wasn't just about money, though financial security was certainly important. It was about refusing to be a victim in a story Michael and Emma were writing. That evening, the doorbell rang unexpectedly. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole, then stepped back in shock. Evelyn, Michael's mother. I hesitated, uncertain whether to answer. Evelyn had always been kind to me, had treated me like the daughter she never had. But she was still Michael's mother. Where would her loyalty lie now? The doorbell rang again, more insistently. Taking a deep breath, I opened the door. Evelyn Hayes stood on my porch, her small frame rigid with what I quickly recognized as fury. At 73, she was still a formidable presence, impeccably dressed as always in a tailored pantsuit despite the summer heat. "Olivia," she said firmly, "I need to speak with you." I stepped aside to let her in, suddenly self-conscious about my appearance. I hadn't bothered with makeup or proper clothes in days, existing in a uniform of yoga pants and oversized t-shirts when I wasn't meeting with Rebecca. Evelyn marched directly to the living room and sat primly on the edge of the sofa, her back ramrod straight. I perched across from her, uncertain what to expect. "Michael came to see me yesterday," she began without preamble. "He told me about the divorce, about Emma." Her mouth twisted with distaste on my sister's name, giving me my first clue about where her sympathies lay. "I see," I said carefully. "No, you don't see, dear." "Not yet." Evelyn leaned forward slightly. "My son thinks I came here to convince you to be reasonable about the divorce settlement. To remind you about family loyalty and how dragging things out will only hurt everyone involved." My heart sank. So she was here as Michael's advocate after all. "But that's not why I'm here," she continued, her voice hardening. "I'm here to tell you to take him for everything he's worth." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "I'm sorry? You heard me correctly." Evelyn's eyes flashed with anger. "What Michael has done is unforgivable. 25 years of marriage, thrown away for your sister? The same sister who got drunk at your wedding and tried to kiss one of the groomsmen? The same sister who borrowed money from you both last year and never paid it back?" "That sister?" I nodded, momentarily speechless. "Well," Evelyn continued, "I raised my son better than this. Or I thought I did. Clearly, I failed somewhere along the line if he thinks this behavior is acceptable." She reached into her handbag and withdrew a manila envelope, which she placed on the coffee table between us. "These are copies of Michael's trust documents," she said matter-of-factly. "The trust from his grandfather that he thinks I don't know about. It's worth approximately $1.2 million now, and he's been drawing from it for years without declaring it on your joint tax returns." I stared at the envelope, then at Evelyn, stunned by this revelation. "Why are you giving me this?" I asked. "Because you deserve better than what he's offering," she said simply. "And because sometimes children need to learn that actions have consequences. Michael seems to have forgotten that particular lesson." Tears stung my eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. After a week of feeling utterly alone in my fight, Evelyn's support was overwhelming. "Thank you," I whispered. Evelyn nodded briskly, clearly uncomfortable with emotional displays. "I've always thought of you as a daughter, Olivia. That doesn't change because my son has lost his mind." She rose, smoothing her slacks. "Now, I've said what I came to say. I suggest you give that envelope to your attorney without telling Michael where you got it. Let him wonder." I walked her to the door, still processing what had just happened. "How did you know I'd hired an attorney?" I asked as she stepped onto the porch. Evelyn smiled thinly. "Michael mentioned it. He seems quite concerned about your choice of representation. Rebecca Carter has quite the reputation, apparently." "Yes," I confirmed. "She does." "Good." Evelyn patted my cheek affectionately. "Make him regret ever hurting you, dear. I'll be cheering from the sidelines." As I watched her drive away, I felt a shift in my perspective. I wasn't alone in this fight. I had allies, Diane, Rebecca, and now, unexpectedly, Evelyn. And with the bombshell information she'd just provided, I had ammunition. I called Rebecca immediately, explaining what had just transpired and the contents of the envelope Evelyn had left. "This is extraordinary," Rebecca said after I finished. "If he's been hiding trust income and withdrawals during your marriage, that's not just relevant to the divorce, it could potentially involve tax fraud. What does that mean for our case?" "It means we just gained significant leverage." I could hear the smile in her voice. "Bring the documents to my office tomorrow morning. We need to adjust our strategy." That night, for the first time since Michael's confession, I didn't cry myself to sleep. Instead, I lay awake planning. The initial shock and grief were still there, a persistent ache beneath my breastbone, but they had been joined by something else, a cold, calculated determination to emerge from this nightmare on my own terms. Michael had taken my trust, my marriage, my sister, and my sense of security. But he wouldn't take my dignity or my future financial stability. On that I was resolute. The following morning, I delivered Evelyn's envelope to Rebecca, who pored over the documents with increasing satisfaction. This trust should have been disclosed as part of the standard financial discovery. she explained. The fact that he's concealed it suggests he was planning to keep it hidden throughout the divorce proceedings as well. Is that illegal? I asked. It's certainly unethical and against court rules, Rebecca replied. And if he signed financial affidavits without disclosing the trust, it would constitute perjury. She tapped her perfectly manicured nails against the documents thoughtfully. I think it's time we had a proper meeting with Michael and his attorney, she said. Let's see how they respond when we mention the trust. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at Rebecca's office. In the meantime, I focused on practical matters, changing the beneficiaries on my life insurance policy and retirement accounts, securing personal items of sentimental value, and documenting the contents of our home with photographs. I also, at Rebecca's suggestion, began discreetly investigating Michael and Emma's relationship timeline. This involved the uncomfortable task of reviewing old text messages, emails, and credit card statements, looking for patterns or evidence that might be useful in negotiations. What I found made my stomach turn. Dinner charges at restaurants I'd never been to. Hotel bookings on weekends when Michael claimed to be at business conferences. A jewelry purchase from Tiffany that I'd never received. The evidence of their affair was scattered throughout our financial records, hiding in plain sight if only I'd thought to look. More disturbing were the emails I recovered from our shared home computer, messages between them that dated back further than the 8 months Michael had admitted to. In fact, the earliest exchanges I found were from over a year ago, beginning innocuously but gradually becoming more intimate. They had been carrying on behind my back for at least 12 months, possibly longer. Every family dinner, every holiday gathering, every casual encounter during that time had been shrouded in deception. Every time Emma had hugged me goodbye, every time Michael had kissed me hello, all while they were secretly betraying me. The discovery left me physically ill. I barely made it to the bathroom before emptying my stomach, then sat on the cold tile floor, shaking with a toxic mix of revulsion and rage. When I could finally stand again, I forwarded the evidence to Rebecca with a terse message. It's been at least a year, not 8 months. Her response came quickly. This strengthens our position. The longer the deception, the more sympathetic you appear if we need to go to court. Court. The word still seemed surreal. How had my life come to this? Potential courtroom battles with the man I'd loved for half my life. The day of the meeting with Michael and his attorney arrived with a strange sense of inevitability. I dressed carefully in a navy sheath dress that emphasized my still trim figure, applied makeup that concealed the evidence of sleepless nights, and styled my hair in a sleek bob that made me look more confident than I felt. Diane offered to drive me, but I declined. I needed to walk into that room on my own, to face Michael without the visible support of others. This was my battle now. Rebecca met me in the lobby, assessing my appearance with an approving nod. Perfect, she said. Professional, dignified, but not overly done. Makes you look like exactly what you are, the wronged party who's not falling apart. I am falling apart, I admitted quietly. Just not where he can see. That's exactly right. She squeezed my arm briefly. Remember, minimal eye contact, no emotional reactions. Let me do the talking. If you need a break, just touch my wrist and we'll call a recess. I nodded, squaring my shoulders as we walked toward the conference room. Michael was already seated at the long table, alongside a silver-haired man in an expensive suit I assumed was his attorney. They both stood as we entered, Michael's eyes immediately seeking mine. I deliberately looked away, focusing instead on setting down my purse and taking my seat across from them. Mrs. Hayes, I'm James Whitford, the silver-haired man introduced himself. I'm representing Mr. Hayes in these proceedings. Mr. Whitford, Rebecca acknowledged with a cool professional smile. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. I'm hoping we can make some progress toward an equitable resolution. That's our hope as well, Whitford replied smoothly. We believe our initial offer was quite generous, but we're open to reasonable negotiation. I kept my expression neutral, but I could feel Michael watching me. His scrutiny made my skin crawl. Before we discuss specific terms, Rebecca began, opening her leather portfolio, I want to ensure we have full financial disclosure from both parties. Transparency is essential for productive negotiations. Whitford nodded agreeably. Of course. Mr. Hayes has provided complete financial documentation as requested. Has he? Rebecca's tone remained pleasant, but I detected the predatory gleam in her eye. That's interesting because we seem to be missing information about a certain trust, the Jeremiah Hayes Trust, specifically. The change in the room was immediate and palpable. Michael stiffened, his face draining of color. Whitford's expression remained controlled, but his eyes darted briefly to Michael in obvious surprise. "I'm not familiar with that particular asset," Whitford said carefully. "Mr. Hayes?" Michael cleared his throat, clearly caught off guard. "That's a personal trust from my grandfather. It predates my marriage and isn't marital property." "Actually," Rebecca countered, pulling documents from her portfolio, "while the trust itself was established before your marriage, the appreciation of assets within the trust during the 25 years of your marriage is very much subject to division in Connecticut, as I'm sure your counsel will confirm." She slid copies of the trust documents across the table, the same documents Evelyn had provided me. "More concerning," she continued, "is the pattern of withdrawals from this trust during the marriage, funds that were used for expenses that benefited both parties, but were never disclosed on joint tax returns. We have documentation of at least 23 such withdrawals over the past 5 years alone." Michael was now visibly uncomfortable, shifting in his seat. Whitford was reviewing the documents with a deepening frown. "We'll need a brief recess to discuss this," Whitford said finally. "Of course," Rebecca agreed pleasantly. "We'll wait." As they left the room, I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Rebecca touched my arm lightly. "You're doing great," she murmured. "His reaction tells us everything we need to know. He never expected you to find out about the trust." "Thank God for Evelyn," I whispered. Indeed, maternal guilt can be a powerful ally. When Michael and Whitford returned 15 minutes later, the atmosphere had shifted noticeably. Whitford's previously affable demeanor had cooled, and Michael looked like he'd been thoroughly chastised. "In light of this oversight," Whitford began carefully, "we'd like to revise our settlement offer." The new proposal they outlined was considerably more generous than their initial offer. 55% of marital assets to me, both properties with the understanding I would sell the main vacation home and give Michael 40% of the proceeds, and a more substantial alimony agreement. Rebecca listened without comment, making notes. When Whitford finished, she closed her portfolio with deliberate slowness. "This is a step in the right direction," she acknowledged, "but still inadequate given the circumstances. My client isn't just dealing with the dissolution of a 25-year marriage. She's coping with the profound betrayal of both her husband and her sister." She pulled out another folder. "Which brings me to another matter we need to address, the timeline of the affair." Michael's head snapped up. "Mr. Hayes informed my client that the relationship with her sister began 8 months ago," Rebecca continued. "However, we have evidence that it began at least 12 months ago, possibly longer." She pushed copies of emails across the table, emails I had discovered on our home computer, emails that left no doubt about the duration and nature of their betrayal. "Furthermore," Rebecca added, "we have documentation of expenses related to this affair that were paid from joint funds, hotels, dinners, gifts." In essence, Mrs. Hayes was unknowingly financing her husband's infidelity with her sister. Michael finally broke his silence. "This is unnecessary," he said tightly. "We don't need to drag all this out." "On the contrary," Rebecca countered, "full disclosure is essential, especially when patterns of deception are established." She turned to Whitford. "Given these new factors, the undisclosed trust, the extended timeline of the affair, and the misuse of joint funds, we believe our counteroffer is actually quite reasonable. 70% of marital assets, both properties and alimony calculated at 40% of Mr. Hayes' income for a duration equal to half the length of the marriage." Whitford's expression remained professional, but his disapproval was evident. "That's extraordinarily punitive, is it?" Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Connecticut courts tend to be quite sympathetic to spouses in Mrs. Hayes' position, especially in long-term marriages where the betrayal involves a family member." She gathered her documents. "We're not interested in a protracted court battle, but we're fully prepared for one if necessary. Discovery would be comprehensive. Every email, every text message, every financial transaction between Mr. Hayes and Emma Fletcher would become part of the public record." The threat hung in the air, its implications clear. Michael, whose professional reputation was important to his career advancement, would face public humiliation if the details of his affair with his wife's sister were aired in court. "We'll need to discuss this with our client," Whitford said stiffly. "Of course." Rebecca stood, signaling the end of the meeting. "We'll expect your response by the end of the week." I followed her lead, rising without looking at Michael. As we turned to leave, he spoke my name. "Olivia." Reluctantly, I met his gaze. The man looking back at me was a stranger, nervous, defensive, caught in a trap of his own making. Where was the Michael I'd loved for 25 years? Had he ever existed? Or had I been deceiving myself all along? "Is this really what you want?" he asked quietly. "To destroy everything?" The audacity of his question left me momentarily speechless. Then, finding my voice, I responded with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "You and Emma already destroyed everything," I said evenly. "I'm just making sure I don't go down with the wreckage." Without waiting for his response, I turned and followed Rebecca from the room, my heart pounding but my head held high. Only when we reached the privacy of her office did I allow myself to sink into a chair, my composure finally cracking. "That was brutal," I whispered, hands shaking slightly. "But also satisfying?" Rebecca smiled, pouring 2 glasses of water from a carafe on her desk. "You did exceptionally well. And yes, there's satisfaction in standing up for yourself, in refusing to be a victim." She handed me a glass. "Based on their reactions, I expect they'll come back with a much improved offer. Whitford knows they're in a vulnerable position now. What if they don't?" I asked. "What if they decide to fight?" "Then we fight back," she said simply. "But I don't think it will come to that. Men like Michael, wealthy, professional, reputation-conscious, rarely want their dirty laundry aired in public. And make no mistake, your sister's involvement makes this particularly scandalous." I sipped my water, considering her words. "I still can't believe Evelyn gave me those trust documents. She's always been so protective of Michael." "Sometimes a parent's disappointment can be a powerful motivator," Rebecca observed. "She sounds like a formidable woman." "She is," I agreed. "Michael has always sought her approval, knowing she disapproves of his actions. That might be affecting him more than anything else." The thought brought a strange comfort. Michael had lost his mother's respect, and that would hurt him in ways money never could. As I left Rebecca's office, I felt oddly lighter despite the emotional intensity of the meeting. Something had shifted inside me, a realization that I was more capable, more resilient than I'd believed. Michael's betrayal had shattered my world, but from the broken pieces, I was building something new, a version of myself that refused to be diminished by his choices. That evening, as predicted, my phone rang with a call from my parents. I'd been avoiding this conversation, but it was inevitable. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Olivia?" My mother's voice was strained with worry. "What on earth is going on?" "Emma's been crying for days, and Michael called your father asking for his help in talking sense into you about the divorce." Of course they'd gone to my parents. Of course they'd tried to shape the narrative before I could. "Mom," I said carefully, "what exactly did they tell you?" "That you're being unreasonable about the divorce settlement," she replied. "That you've hired some shark lawyer who's demanding everything. Michael said you won't even talk to them, that you're out for revenge." I closed my eyes, counting silently to 10 to control my temper. "Did they happen to mention why we're getting divorced?" I asked when I could trust my voice again. "Did they explain that Michael has been having an affair with Emma for at least a year?" The silence on the other end was deafening. "What?" My mother's voice had dropped to a stunned whisper. "No, that can't be right." "It is right, Mom. Michael told me himself. He's leaving me for Emma. My sister has been sleeping with my husband behind my back for at least a year, possibly longer." I heard a choked sound, then muffled voices as my mother presumably relayed this information to my father. "Olivia," she said finally, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know what to say. We had no idea." "Well, now you do," I said flatly. "So you can understand why I'm not feeling particularly generous about the divorce settlement, and why I'm not interested in talking to either of them." "Of course," she murmured. "Oh, Olivia, I'm so sorry. I can't believe Emma would do this, or Michael, after 25 years. Her voice broke, and I felt a pang of guilt for delivering this news so bluntly. My parents were in their 70s. This kind of family fracture would be devastating for them. "I'm sorry you're caught in the middle," I said more gently. "I know this puts you in an impossible position." "Don't you worry about us," my mother said, her voice firming with sudden resolve. You focus on taking care of yourself. And if you need that shark lawyer, you use her. Don't let them pressure you into settling for less than you deserve." Her unexpected support brought tears to my eyes. "Thanks, Mom. Your father wants to speak with you," she said, and I heard the phone changing hands. "Livy?" My father's gruff voice came on the line, using the childhood nickname I hadn't heard in years. "You okay, kiddo?" "Not really, Dad," I admitted. "But I'm fighting. That's my girl." He cleared his throat awkwardly. "Listen, I know I'm not good with all this emotional stuff, but I want you to know something. You've always been the responsible one, the one who did everything right. Sometimes your mother and I probably didn't appreciate that enough because we were so busy dealing with Emma's challenges." I remained silent, touched by this rare moment of candor from my stoic father. "But we've always been proud of you," he continued. "And we're on your side in this. 100%. You hear me?" "I hear you, Dad," I whispered, tears flowing freely now. "Thank you." After we hung up, I sat in my silent house, processing the conversation. My parents' support was unexpected and deeply moving. Like Evelyn's intervention, it reminded me that I wasn't as alone as I'd felt in those first devastating days after Michael's confession. The realization brought strength I desperately needed for the battle ahead, because despite Rebecca's confidence that Michael would settle rather than risk public exposure, I knew him well enough to know he wouldn't surrender easily. He had too much pride, too much at stake. The following days proved my instinct correct. Rather than accepting the reality of his vulnerable position, Michael launched a counteroffensive. He began with a series of text messages that oscillated between self-justification and veiled threats. "Michael, this doesn't have to be so adversarial. We had 25 good years. Don't let it end like this." I didn't respond. "Michael, Rebecca Carter has a reputation for destroying people. Is that really what you want? To destroy me?" Still, I maintained my silence, forwarding each message to Rebecca as instructed. "Michael, I've built my career on my reputation. If you drag my name through the mud with these divorce proceedings, you'll regret it. I have nothing to lose at this point." That one made me laugh bitterly. Nothing to lose? He still had his career, his freedom, his new relationship. I was the one who had lost everything. When the messages didn't elicit the response he wanted, Michael escalated. Mutual friends began calling, concerned about the rumors they'd heard, urging me to consider reconciliation or at least a more amicable divorce. It became clear that Michael was attempting to manage his reputation by portraying me as vindictive and unreasonable. Rebecca advised me to maintain dignified silence rather than engaging in a public relations battle. "Let him show his desperation," she counseled. "Every person he sends to pressure you is another witness to his manipulation." Then came the financial maneuvers. Despite the court order freezing our joint assets, Michael attempted to refinance the main property without my knowledge, presumably to extract equity before it could be awarded to me. The attempt failed due to the asset freeze, but it revealed his willingness to defy court orders. More disturbingly, Diane discovered through a mutual acquaintance that Michael had been inquiring about job opportunities abroad, specifically in countries with limited extradition treaties with the United States. When I relayed this information to Rebecca, her response was immediate and forceful. "This suggests he's considering leaving the country to avoid financial obligations," she said grimly. "We need to act quickly." She filed an emergency motion requesting that Michael surrender his passport to the court until the divorce was finalized. The judge granted the motion, dealing another blow to whatever plans Michael might have been formulating. The legal back and forth continued for weeks, a draining process of motions, counter-motions, and increasingly hostile communications between attorneys. Through it all, I maintained my resolve, bolstered by the support network I'd assembled: Diane, Rebecca, Evelyn, my parents, and a small circle of loyal friends who stood by me despite Michael's attempts to turn them against me. Emma made several attempts to contact me directly, showing up at my workplace and even at the house once, forcing me to call the police to remove her from the property. Her tearful pleas for forgiveness fell on deaf ears. Whatever sister relationship we'd had was irrevocably shattered. Nothing remained but the cold determination to ensure she and Michael didn't profit from their betrayal. Then, 2 months into the divorce proceedings, there was an unexpected development. Rebecca called early one morning, her voice charged with unusual excitement. "Whitford reached out," she said without preamble. "They want to settle. Their new offer is on my desk, and it's, Well, it's very close to what we've been demanding. What changed? I asked, surprised by this sudden capitulation. I'm not entirely sure, Rebecca admitted, but I suspect it might be related to some corporate restructuring at Westridge Technologies. There are rumors of a merger, and Michael would likely be required to undergo extensive background checks and financial scrutiny if he wants to retain his position post-merger. It made sense. Michael's career had always been his primary focus, second only to his public image. The prospect of a messy public divorce with allegations of hidden assets and financial impropriety would jeopardize his professional future. What exactly are they offering? I asked. 65% of all marital assets to you, both properties outright and alimony at 35% of his income for 10 years, Rebecca detailed. Plus, they're not contesting our demand for him to cover all your legal fees. It wasn't everything we'd asked for, but it was remarkably close, and considerably more than I would likely receive if we went to court. What's the catch? I asked suspiciously. This sudden generosity felt too good to be true. They want a non-disclosure agreement, Rebecca replied. Both parties would be legally prohibited from discussing the details of the divorce or the reasons behind it. I considered this. An NDA would protect Michael's reputation, and, by extension, Emma's. It would prevent me from publicly sharing the full story of their betrayal. What do you recommend? I asked. Honestly, take it, Rebecca advised. The financial terms are excellent, and an NDA cuts both ways. It would also prevent them from spreading any narratives about you being unreasonable or vindictive. She paused before adding, besides, the people who matter to you already know the truth. She was right. My closest friends, my parents, Evelyn, they all knew what had really happened. Did I need the hollow satisfaction of public vindication at the expense of prolonged legal battles? I'll take the deal, I decided. But I want one addition. What's that? I want the NDA to specifically prohibit Emma from contacting me for any reason, directly or through intermediaries. Complete separation. Rebecca's smile was evident in her voice. I think we can make that happen. The final divorce settlement was signed 3 weeks later in Rebecca's office. Michael attended with Whitford, looking tired and defeated. He attempted to catch my eye several times during the proceedings, but I maintained my focus on the documents in front of me, signing where indicated without hesitation or emotion. Only when the final signature was complete did I allow myself to meet his gaze. What I saw surprised me, not anger or resentment, but something that looked almost like regret. Olivia, he began. But I shook my head. Don't, I said quietly. There's nothing left to say. We're done here. As I gathered my copies of the settlement papers and prepared to leave, Michael spoke again, his voice low enough that only I could hear. I never meant to hurt you like this, he said. I know you won't believe me, but it's true. I paused, considering whether to respond. In the end, I couldn't resist one parting shot. You know what the saddest part is, Michael? You threw away 25 years for a relationship that won't last 5, because if she could do this to her own sister, what makes you think she won't do the same to you? The flash of uncertainty that crossed his face told me my words had hit their mark. With nothing more to say, I walked out of the office and out of my marriage, leaving Michael Hayes firmly in my past. Outside, the September air was crisp with the promise of autumn. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk, breathing deeply, feeling a strange sense of lightness. The divorce was final. The fight was over. And against all odds, I had emerged victorious. Not just financially, though the settlement would ensure my security for the rest of my life. I had won something more valuable, my self-respect, my independence, my freedom from a man who had proven himself unworthy of my love and loyalty. As I walked to my car, my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. Diane, is it done? Are you officially free? Me, it's done. Settlement signed. NDA in place. I get almost everything. Diane, hell yes! Come over. We're celebrating tonight. Ben's making his famous paella, and I've got champagne chilling. Me, on my way. I slipped the phone back into my purse, a smile tugging at my lips. My life had been shattered 2 months ago by 12 simple words. Now I was piecing together something new from the fragments, something that might in time be stronger and more authentic than what had been broken. The road ahead was uncertain. I would need to rebuild, to rediscover who I was outside of the identity I'd held for 25 years as Michael's wife. There would be difficult days, painful memories, moments of doubt and loneliness. But as I drove toward Diane's house, toward friendship and celebration and the beginning of whatever came next, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel so soon after the end of my marriage. Hope. After 25 years, he had left me for my sister, but I had taken everything in the divorce, not just the material assets but my dignity, my self-worth, and my future, and that perhaps was the sweetest revenge of all. The autumn following my divorce began with unfamiliar silence. After 25 years of marriage, I'd forgotten what it meant to be truly alone. The house, my house now, legally and irrevocably, felt cavernous despite its modest size. Footsteps echoed differently. Routines dissolved. The queen-sized bed that once felt too small for two people now stretched before me like a vast empty plain. Freedom, I discovered, was both exhilarating and terrifying. "You need to redecorate," Diane insisted one Saturday morning in early October as she surveyed my living room with critical eyes. "This place still looks like Michael lives here." I followed her gaze, seeing my home through her perspective. The leather sectional Michael had insisted on. The abstract paintings he'd selected with an art consultant. The pretentious chess set displayed on the coffee table that neither of us actually played. "You're right," I admitted, suddenly uncomfortable in my own space. "I don't even like half this stuff." Diane grinned, already pulling out her phone. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've had a Pinterest board started for you since the day you kicked him out." That weekend became the first in a series of therapeutic purges. We started small, replacing throw pillows, rearranging furniture, taking down artwork that had never spoken to me. Each change, however minor, felt like reclaiming territory. By November, I'd grown bolder. The leather sectional was donated to a women's shelter, the pretentious chess set sold on eBay. The master bedroom, a space too haunted by memories, was completely gutted and transformed with new paint, new bedding, new energy. "It's like an exorcism," I explained to my mother during one of our now weekly phone calls. "Each thing I change pushes out another ghost." "That's healthy," she affirmed. "Creating your own space again." My parents had surprised me with their unwavering support following the divorce. They maintained contact with Emma. She was still their daughter after all, but they never pressured me for reconciliation, never suggested I should forgive and move on. They understood, perhaps better than I'd given them credit for, the magnitude of her betrayal. Financial security granted me freedom most newly divorced women my age couldn't enjoy. Thanks to Rebecca's fierce negotiation, I owned both properties outright, possessed a substantial investment portfolio, and received generous monthly alimony deposits. I could have chosen not to work, but the library had always been my sanctuary, and I needed its familiar rhythms now more than ever. "Ms. Hayes, you don't have to shelve those," Jeremy, one of our college interns, protested as I wheeled a cart of returns through the biography section one quiet Tuesday. "I can do it." "I know," I replied, smiling, "but I want to." The simple, methodical task of returning books to their proper places soothed me in ways therapy hadn't quite managed. There was comfort in order, in knowing exactly where everything belonged. Unlike life, library organization followed clear, unwavering rules. December approached with its inevitable emotional landmines, our anniversary, the holidays. Traditional gatherings suddenly rendered impossible by the new family fracture. I braced myself for the pain these milestones would bring. "You should come to Aspen with us," Diane offered. "Ben's sister has that condo she never uses. We could ski, drink ridiculously expensive hot chocolate, and completely ignore the fact that Christmas exists." The invitation was tempting, an escape from the empty house and the memories that would surely intensify during the season. But something in me resisted. "I think I need to face it," I told her. "If I run away this year, I'll want to run away next year too. I need to learn how to do holidays alone." In truth, I wasn't entirely alone. Evelyn, to my continued surprise, remained a steady presence in my life. She called weekly, invited me to lunch monthly, and made it abundantly clear that her loyalty lay with me, not her son. "I've booked us cooking classes," she announced during one of our lunches in early December, Italian cuisine. "Every Thursday evening in January." I blinked in surprise. "You hate cooking?" "Precisely," she sniffed delicately. "But I'm told it's good to develop new interests at my age. Keeps dementia at bay. And you need to get out more." Her transparent concern touched me deeply. "Cooking classes sound lovely," I said, meaning it. Our unlikely friendship had become one of the unexpected gifts emerging from the wreckage of my marriage. Evelyn was sharp-tongued, opinionated, and fiercely loyal, qualities I'd always appreciated but now actively cherished. "Have you heard from him?" she asked carefully, the question she always waited until the end of our meetings to pose. "Not directly," I answered truthfully. "The non-disclosure agreement works both ways. But Diane ran into them at that new restaurant downtown last week, and—" Evelyn couldn't quite hide her curiosity. I smiled slightly, remembering Diane's gleeful report. "Apparently, they looked miserable. Barely spoke to each other the entire meal." Evelyn nodded, unsurprised. "Relationships built on deceit rarely thrive once the excitement of secrecy is gone." Her assessment aligned with my own observations, limited though they were by our legally mandated distance. Through mutual acquaintances and the inevitable small-town overlap, I'd heard whispers that all was not paradise for the new couple. Emma had moved into Michael's rented condo almost immediately after the divorce was finalized, but rumors suggested their domestic bliss had quickly deteriorated. I'd like to say I didn't care, that I'd evolved beyond interest in their happiness or misery, but that would be a lie. Some dark, wounded part of me savored each report of their discord, each suggestion that their grand passion might be fizzling under the weight of reality. The schadenfreude wasn't something I was proud of, but I accepted it as part of my healing process. After all, I was only human. Christmas arrived with less devastation than I'd feared. I spent Christmas Eve alone by choice, wrapping presents for my nieces and nephews, my brother's children, not Emma's, while playing jazz renditions of holiday classics. The silence of the house felt companionable rather than oppressive, and I surprised myself by enjoying the peaceful solitude. Christmas Day brought brunch with my parents, just the three of us, a configuration we hadn't experienced since before I left for college. We carefully avoided mentioning either Michael or Emma, focusing instead on reminiscing about holidays past and discussing my father's recent adventure into smartphone technology. "Your mother wants me to do the Facebook," he complained as we washed dishes together. "I told her nothing good comes from putting your business on the computer for everyone to see." I laughed, a genuine sound that felt rusty but welcome. "You're not wrong, Dad." The afternoon took me to Diane and Ben's for dinner with their extended family, a boisterous gathering that swept me into its warmth without making me feel like the pitiful divorced friend. Ben's teenage niece cornered me after dessert, eyes wide with earnest curiosity. "Is it true your husband left you for your sister? That's like Shakespeare-level drama." "Miranda!" Ben hissed from across the room, mortified. I should have been offended, but there was something refreshing about her candor after months of careful conversations and pitying glances. "It is pretty Shakespearean," I agreed, smiling slightly, though thankfully with less dying at the end. The girl grinned appreciatively. "Are you going to write a book about it?" "You totally should. It would sell millions." "The non-disclosure agreement prevents that, unfortunately," I told her, enjoying her theatrical groan of disappointment. Later, as I drove home through streets decorated with twinkling lights, I realized I'd made it through the day without crying once. It was a small victory, but significant, the first holiday navigated successfully in my new reality. January brought Evelyn's cooking classes, which proved surprisingly enjoyable despite our mutual culinary ineptitude. February delivered a library fundraiser that consumed my professional attention. March welcomed an impromptu weekend trip to New York with Diane to see a Broadway show. Life continued. Not the life I'd planned, but a life nevertheless. Day by day, I found myself smiling more, crying less, breathing easier. Then came the email that shattered my hard-won equilibrium. It arrived on a rainy April morning, nearly 7 months after the divorce. The sender's name alone, Emma Fletcher, sent a jolt of adrenaline through my system. How was this possible? The non-disclosure agreement specifically prohibited her from contacting me directly. My finger hovered over the delete button, but curiosity, that eternal human weakness, won out. Subject: please read. Important health information from Emma Fletcher to Olivia Hayes. Olivia, I know I'm not supposed to contact you directly, and I've respected that boundary until now. But this isn't about me or Michael or what happened between us. This is about something you need to know for your own health. Mom and Dad probably haven't told you, but I was diagnosed with BRCA1 last month. It's a genetic mutation that significantly increases the risk of breast and ovarian cancer. Given our family history with Grandma and Aunt Sarah, the genetic counselor strongly recommended that all female relatives be tested. I've attached information about the mutation and testing options. There are preventative measures available if you test positive. I'm not expecting a response. I just couldn't live with myself if I didn't make sure you had this information. Emma. I stared at the screen, emotions warring within me. Anger at the intrusion, fear at the health implications, suspicion about her motives, confusion about how to respond. The attached documents appeared legitimate. Medical literature about the BRCA1 mutation, testing protocols, statistical risk assessments. If this was a ploy to reestablish contact, it was an elaborately researched one. I called my mother immediately. "Is it true?" I asked without preamble when she answered. "About Emma's diagnosis?" Her long pause and heavy sigh confirmed it before she spoke. "Yes. We were going to tell you this weekend in person. We didn't want to worry you over the phone. Why wouldn't you tell me immediately?" I demanded, a new hurt blooming. "This affects me too. We were trying to figure out how," she admitted. "The situation between you girls makes everything so complicated. We knew you'd have to get tested, but we were afraid you might refuse if it came through Emma." She wasn't wrong. My initial impulse upon realizing the email was from Emma had been rejection, deletion, denial. "Have you been tested?" I asked. "Yes," she replied quietly. "I'm positive for the mutation, which means I have a 50% chance of carrying it too," I finished, medical knowledge from a library research project surfacing in my mind. The revelation cast my personal drama in a new, stark perspective. While I'd been nursing my wounds and rebuilding my life, genetic time bombs might have been quietly ticking inside me, indifferent to my marital problems or emotional state. I made an appointment with my doctor that afternoon. Within a week, I'd had blood drawn for the genetic test and scheduled a mammogram and pelvic ultrasound as precautionary measures. The waiting period for results stretched before me like an endless corridor of anxiety. Should I respond to Emma's email? The question plagued me. The non-disclosure agreement provided a convenient shield against communication, but ignoring a message about potentially life-threatening medical information seemed petty even to my wounded heart. After 3 days of internal debate, I composed a brief reply. "Emma, thank you for the information. I've scheduled testing. Olivia Cold. Clinical. Necessary." I hit send before I could reconsider, then immediately blocked her email address again. The brief exchange had left me shaky and unsettled, old pain resurfacing like a physical ailment. "It's like ripping off a scab that was finally healing," I complained to Diane over wine that evening. Just seeing her name in my inbox brought everything back. "Of course it did," Diane soothed, "but you handled it the right way. Acknowledged the information without opening the door to further communication. I just hate that she had a legitimate reason to contact me," I admitted. "Part of me wants to believe she's manipulating the situation somehow. Even Emma wouldn't stoop to faking cancer risks," Diane reasoned. "And if she is positive for the mutation, she was ethically obligated to tell you." Logic didn't ease my emotional turmoil. That night, for the first time in months, Michael haunted my dreams. Not the Michael of our marriage's end, but the young man I'd fallen in love with, laughing as we picnicked in the park where he'd proposed. I woke with tears on my face and a hollow ache in my chest. The test results arrived 2 weeks later, positive for the BRCA1 mutation. The genetic counselor outlined my options in a voice calibrated for compassion without alarm: increased surveillance, prophylactic surgeries, medication protocols. At my age, she recommended considering bilateral mastectomy and oophorectomy to virtually eliminate my elevated cancer risk. "Take some time to process this information," she advised. "These are major decisions that shouldn't be rushed." I left her office in a daze, medical pamphlets clutched in my hand like lifelines. The universe, it seemed, had an ironic sense of humor. Just as I was reclaiming my identity and independence, my own body had presented a new crisis to navigate. That evening, I sat alone on my newly purchased patio furniture, watching spring twilight settle over my backyard. Birds called their evening songs. Neighbors' children shouted playfully a few houses down. A gentle breeze carried the scent of someone grilling nearby. Life continuing in its ordinary beauty while I contemplated removing parts of my body to prevent disease. For the first time in months, I desperately wished for Michael's presence, not the Michael who had betrayed me, but the partner who had held my hand through medical scares before, who had researched treatment options and asked doctors the questions I was too overwhelmed to formulate. The realization sent me inside for the bottle of expensive scotch I kept for rare occasions. As I poured 2 fingers into a crystal tumbler, another divorce acquisition, my phone rang. The screen displayed my mother's name. "The results came back positive," I said without greeting, assuming the purpose of her call. "I know," she replied softly. "The genetic counselor called me. I'm so sorry, honey." "Did Emma's?" The question escaped before I could censor it. "Yes," my mother confirmed. "She's already scheduled her surgeries for next month." Of course she had. Emma had always been decisive while I deliberated, impulsive while I planned. Even facing identical medical threats, our fundamental differences persisted. "What are you thinking?" my mother asked carefully. "That I need more information before I decide anything." I took a long sip of scotch, welcoming its warming burn. "I've already started researching. There are various approaches depending on age, family planning considerations, personal risk tolerance." "That sounds like you," she said, affection evident in her tone, thoughtful and thorough. We spoke for nearly an hour, discussing medical options, family history, practical considerations. For the first time in our relationship, my mother listened more than she talked, offering support without directive. When we finally said goodnight, I felt oddly strengthened by the conversation. The following weeks brought consultations with specialists, conversations with other BRCA1 positive women, deep dives into medical research. My librarian's skill for thorough investigation served me well as I assembled the information needed to make these crucial decisions. Through this medical odyssey, life's regular rhythms continued. I finalized the sale of the main vacation property, using part of the proceeds to renovate my master bathroom into a spa-like retreat. I attended a week-long library conference in Chicago, discovering I enjoyed solo travel more than anticipated. I even accepted a dinner invitation from Walter, a recently divorced history professor who frequented my library, though I made it clear friendship was all I could offer at present. "Perfectly understandable," he'd said with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "I'm still learning how to eat in restaurants alone without feeling like I have a neon abandoned husband sign flashing over my head." His self-deprecating humor had made me laugh, and dinner had been pleasant. Conversation flowing easily between two people with similar wounds and intellectual interests. We'd parted with loose plans to attend a museum exhibit together someday. No pressure or expectations weighing the invitation. By June, I'd made my medical decisions, bilateral mastectomy with reconstruction, but delaying the oophorectomy for a year to allow for less abrupt hormonal changes. Surgery was scheduled for August, selected to minimize disruption to the library's summer reading program and allow recovery before fall programming began. "You're handling this with remarkable grace," Evelyn observed during our monthly lunch in late June. "Michael would be falling apart." I smiled wryly. "Well, we've established I'm the stronger one." "Indeed." She patted my hand with unexpected tenderness. "I hope you know I'll be there for whatever you need after surgery. Rides to appointments, groceries, company, anything at all." Her offer touched me deeply. "Thank you. That means a lot. I may have failed spectacularly as a mother-in-law deterrent," she said dryly, "but I hope I've succeeded as a friend." "You have," I assured her. "More than you know." As summer progressed, I found myself settling into acceptance, not just of my medical situation but of my new life generally. The raw wound of betrayal had gradually transformed into a scar, still visible, occasionally sensitive, but no longer actively painful. Then came the charity gala that changed everything. The annual fundraiser for the city's arts programs was a mandatory social event for the library director, which meant I was obligated to attend despite my general avoidance of large gatherings where I might encounter Michael. As Westridge Technologies was a major donor, his presence was equally assured. "We'll create a buffer zone," Diane promised as we shopped for appropriate attire. "Ben and I won't leave your side. If Michael approaches, Ben will immediately engage him in mind-numbing conversation about golf handicaps." Her loyalty made me laugh. "I appreciate the strategy, but it's been almost a year. I can be in the same room with him without falling apart." "Are you sure?" "Because I've been practicing my accidental wine spill technique. I can target his crotch with remarkable accuracy." The mental image was tempting, but I shook my head. As satisfying as that would be, I'd rather show him I've moved on completely. "Success is the best revenge, right?" "In that case," Diane said decisively, "we're getting you a dress that makes you look so spectacular he'll regret every life choice that led to losing you." We found it in a small boutique, an elegant midnight blue gown with a subtle shimmer that caught the light as I moved. The neckline was lower than I would typically choose, the silhouette more fitted, but the effect was undeniably striking. "It's perfect," Diane declared. Sophisticated sexy, not trying too hard sexy? I studied my reflection critically. At 48, I wasn't deluded about my appearance. The years had left their marks. Fine lines around my eyes, silver threads among my chestnut hair, a softening at my waistline that no amount of recent yoga could completely firm. But there was something compelling about the woman in the mirror, a confidence, a quiet strength that hadn't been there before. "I'll take it," I decided. The night of the gala arrived with perfect late July weather, warm enough for sleeveless dresses but without the oppressive humidity that often plagued our summers. I spent more time than usual on my appearance, allowing Diane's hairstylist to create a softly upswept style that emphasized my cheekbones, applying makeup with a more practiced hand than my usual minimal approach. "You look stunning," Ben said appreciatively when they picked me up. "Doesn't she, Di?" "Absolutely radiant," Diane agreed, eyes suspiciously bright. "Michael's going to swallow his tongue." I laughed, slightly embarrassed by their enthusiasm. "That's not the goal, but I'll take the compliment." The converted warehouse space hosting the gala was transformed with twinkling lights, dramatic floral arrangements, and the soft strains of a string quartet. As we entered, I instinctively scanned the room, a reflex born from months of avoiding unexpected encounters with my ex-husband. "He's not here yet," Diane murmured, correctly interpreting my surveillance. "Let's get drinks and stake out advantageous territory." Armed with champagne and positioned near a massive floral display perfect for strategic retreat if necessary, I gradually relaxed into conversation with familiar faces, library board members, regular patrons, fellow department heads from the city government. Several people I hadn't seen since before the divorce offered discreet expressions of support or admiration for my resilience. "Olivia Hayes, you are a vision tonight." The voice behind me belonged to Walter, the history professor I'd had dinner with months earlier. He smiled warmly, looking distinguished in a well-tailored tuxedo. "Walter, hello," I greeted him with genuine pleasure. "I didn't know you'd be here. Last-minute invitation," he explained. "The university president had an extra ticket when his wife came down with summer flu. I clean up reasonably well, so I was deemed acceptable replacement arm candy." His self-deprecating humor made me smile. "You clean up very well, actually." He beamed at the compliment. High praise from the most elegant woman in the room. "How have you been? Still proceeding with the surgery next month?" I nodded, touched that he'd remembered. "August 17th. I'd be happy to join your meal train or airport shuttle service," he offered. "Whatever would be helpful." "That's very kind," I began, then froze as a familiar figure entered my peripheral vision. Michael had arrived, looking much as he always did at these events, confident, polished, commanding attention without obvious effort. But he wasn't alone. Emma clung to his arm, radiant in a red dress that showcased her slender figure. Her hair was shorter than I remembered, cut into a stylish bob that emphasized her delicate features. She looked happy, vibrant, completely at ease as Michael introduced her to an elderly couple I recognized as major arts patrons. "Breathe," Walter murmured, astutely assessing the situation. "Would you like to step outside for a moment?" I shook my head, forcing air into suddenly constricted lungs. "No, I'm fine," but I wasn't fine. Seeing them together, not in the abstract way I'd imagined during sleepless nights but in vivid, undeniable reality, struck me with unexpected force. They looked right together somehow, matched in energy and presence in a way Michael and I had never quite achieved. "Olivia." Diane appeared at my elbow, her expression concerned. "Let's refresh our drinks." I allowed her to guide me toward the bar, grateful for the momentary escape. "I didn't expect her to be here," I admitted quietly. "Me neither," Diane muttered. The invitation definitely didn't include a +1 option. He must have pulled strings. Of course he had. Michael excelled at bending rules to suit his preferences. Once, I'd admired that quality, mistaking it for decisive leadership rather than recognizing the entitlement at its core. "It doesn't matter," I said, more to convince myself than Diane. I knew I'd see them together eventually. Still a shock, though. She squeezed my arm sympathetically. "You're handling it like a champion." We rejoined Ben and Walter, strategically positioning ourselves to maintain maximum distance from the new arrivals. I forced myself to engage in conversation, to laugh at appropriate moments, to present the image of a woman completely unbothered by her ex-husband's presence. The charade required so much concentration that I didn't immediately notice Michael approaching until he stood before our small group. "Olivia," he greeted me, his voice carrying that familiar timbre that once represented home. "You look well," an understatement delivered with careful neutrality. His eyes, however, conveyed more: surprise, appreciation, perhaps a flicker of something deeper. "Thank you," I replied coolly. "You remember Diane and Ben, of course. And this is Walter Chen, professor of European history at the university." Walter extended his hand with confident cordiality. "A pleasure to meet you." Michael shook it briefly, assessing Walter with the quick calculation he applied to all new acquaintances. "Likewise." An awkward silence descended, heavy with unspoken history. "I understand congratulations are in order," Michael said finally. "The library's literacy program won national recognition last month." "Yes," I confirmed. "We're quite proud of the team's accomplishments." More strained silence. Diane shifted closer to me in silent support. "I should return to my guests," Michael said eventually. "I just wanted to say hello." A polite fiction. He had no guests beyond Emma, who was watching our interaction from across the room with poorly concealed anxiety. "Of course," I replied with a social smile that didn't reach my eyes. "Enjoy your evening." He hesitated, as though waiting for something more, then nodded and retreated. I released a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "That was impressively Arctic," Ben observed admiringly. "I think the temperature dropped 10 degrees when you smiled at him." Walter chuckled. "Remind me never to get on your bad side, Olivia." Their levity helped dispel the tension, and I managed a genuine smile. "Sorry for the awkwardness." "Are you kidding?" "That was masterful," Diane insisted. "You were poised, dignified, and clearly unaffected by his presence." Meanwhile, he looked like a man who suddenly realized he made a catastrophic error. "You're exaggerating," I protested, though her assessment aligned with my own impression of Michael's discomfort. "I'm really not," she countered. "He couldn't take his eyes off you." Whether true or merely the supportive hyperbole of a loyal friend, Diane's observation bolstered my confidence. I straightened my shoulders and determined to enjoy the remainder of the evening despite Michael and Emma's presence. Walter proved an unexpected ally in this mission, keeping me engaged with amusing observations about the other guests and thoughtful questions about my work. His attentiveness felt refreshingly genuine, interested without being intrusive, appreciative without being objectifying. "Would you consider having dinner with me again sometime?" he asked as the evening wound down. "Perhaps next weekend, before your surgery?" The invitation surprised me, though in retrospect his interest had been fairly obvious. "I'd like that," I heard myself say before fully processing the implications. His smile was warm. "Wonderful. I'll call you to arrange details if that's all right." "Yes, that would be fine." As Walter excused himself to bid farewell to colleagues, Diane appeared at my side, barely containing her excitement. "Did I just witness you agreeing to a date with Professor Handsome?" "It's just dinner," I protested weakly. Her knowing smile made me blush slightly. "Just dinner with an attractive, intelligent man who clearly admires you and remembers details about your life. Totally casual." Before I could formulate a suitably dismissive response, a commotion near the entrance drew our attention. Emma appeared to be arguing with Michael, her voice rising just enough to attract notice. His expression was thunderous as he gripped her elbow, guiding her toward the exit with barely concealed irritation. "Trouble in paradise," Diane murmured with undisguised satisfaction. I should have felt vindicated by their obvious discord. Instead, I felt a complex mixture of emotions: pity for Emma, contempt for Michael, and a strange, detached sense that I was watching characters in a play rather than people who had once been central to my life. "Let's go," I suggested, suddenly weary. "I've fulfilled my social obligation." The drive home was quiet, Diane and Ben respecting my need for silence after the emotionally taxing evening. When they dropped me off, Diane hugged me tightly. "You were magnificent tonight," she whispered. "Truly." Inside my empty house, I kicked off the uncomfortable heels and unzipped the beautiful dress, hanging it carefully before changing into pajamas. As I removed my makeup, I studied my reflection, searching for signs of the emotional turmoil I'd experienced upon seeing Michael and Emma together. To my surprise, I looked calm. Tired, perhaps, but not devastated or angry. Progress, I decided. Definite progress. Sleep came easier than expected, dreamless and deep. I awoke the next morning to sunlight streaming through curtains I'd forgotten to close and the distant sound of neighborhood lawn mowers. Ordinary Saturday sounds that once would have found me curled beside Michael, planning our weekend together. Now they heralded a day entirely my own, to spend as I wished, answering to no one. The freedom still felt novel, not yet routine despite the passing months. I made coffee and carried it to my newly furnished back patio, scrolling through news on my tablet while birds argued in the oak tree overhead. The peaceful moment was interrupted by a text notification. Unknown number. I hope this isn't too forward, but I couldn't wait until a reasonable hour to ask about dinner. Would Saturday evening work for you? Walter, I smiled at his enthusiasm, adding his number to my contacts before replying. Me, Saturday would be lovely. Not too forward at all. Walter, excellent. I know a wonderful little Italian place near the university. 7 o'clock? Me, perfect. The exchange left me feeling unexpectedly light. It wasn't that I harbored romantic illusions about Walter, my heart remained too damaged for that, but the simple pleasure of being appreciated, of being seen as someone worth pursuing, provided a balm for old wounds. The week passed in a flurry of activity, finalizing details for my medical leave, training the assistant director who would manage the library in my absence, attending pre-operative appointments. The looming surgery occupied most of my thoughts, pushing aside contemplation of my dinner with Walter or the emotions stirred by seeing Michael and Emma at the gala. Saturday evening arrived with an attack of nerves I hadn't anticipated. I changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple wraparound dress in deep teal that flattered without trying too hard. As I applied mascara with a slightly unsteady hand, I confronted the reality that this was, indeed, a date, my first proper date in nearly 26 years. "This is ridiculous," I told my reflection. "You're a grown woman having dinner with a nice man, not a teenager going to prom." The self-admonishment helped, but the flutter of anxiety persisted as Walter's car pulled into my driveway precisely at 6:45. He approached my door carrying a small potted orchid rather than cut flowers, a thoughtful touch that immediately eased some tension. "I thought this might last longer," he explained, handing me the elegant plant. "Though I can't guarantee its survival in my care, so perhaps that's presumptuous." His self-deprecating humor made me smile. "It's lovely, thank you. And orchids are surprisingly resilient if you don't overwater them." The restaurant proved to be exactly as promised, intimate without being overtly romantic, quiet enough for conversation without awkward silences, serving authentic Italian cuisine that put chain restaurants to shame. Walter was attentive without hovering, interested without interrogating, sharing stories of his own divorce when appropriate without dwelling on past hurts. "It's strange, isn't it?" he mused as we shared tiramisu. "Learning to date again at our age. The last time I did this, we didn't have cell phones or Google to investigate potential partners beforehand." I laughed in recognition. "I keep expecting to be asked to pass notes with checkboxes. Do you like me? Yes. No. Maybe. I'd definitely check yes," Walter said with a warmth that made me blush slightly. The evening progressed with comfortable conversation and cautious flirtation. When Walter walked me to my door later, there was a moment of mutual hesitation, the age-old dance of first-date endings, complicated by our mutual divorce baggage and my impending surgery. "I've had a wonderful time," he said, standing a respectful distance away. "So have I replied sincerely. "I'd very much like to see you again," he continued. "But I understand your focus is on your health right now, as it should be. So perhaps we could plan something for after your recovery?" His consideration touched me deeply. "I'd like that. May I?" he asked softly, stepping closer. I nodded, and he leaned in to place a gentle kiss on my cheek, chaste but lingering, a promise rather than a demand. "Good night, Olivia," he said as he stepped back. "I'll call you tomorrow if that's all right." "Yes," I agreed. "Good night, Walter." Inside, I touched my cheek where his lips had been, analyzing my reaction. Not fireworks or breathless passion, but something quieter, a gentle warmth, a cautious appreciation. It was enough, more than enough for now. The promised call came the following afternoon, a pleasant conversation that established a comfortable pattern. Over the next 2 weeks leading to my surgery, Walter and I spoke almost daily, sometimes briefly, sometimes for hours. We shared another dinner, a Sunday museum visit, a weekday lunch near the university. Each encounter deepened my appreciation for his steady presence and thoughtful mind. He never pressured for more physical intimacy than I was ready to offer, never pushed for emotional revelations I wasn't prepared to make. His patience seemed limitless, his understanding genuine. "You know," Diane observed after meeting us for coffee, "he looks at you the way my grandfather looked at my grandmother after 50 years of marriage, like he's still discovering new things to admire." The observation made me uncomfortable in its intensity. "We're just getting to know each other," I protested. "It's far too soon for that kind of connection." Diane shrugged. "Some people just recognize their match faster than others." I dismissed her romantic notion, but her words lingered. Walter did look at me with unusual attention, as though truly seeing me rather than some projection of what he wanted me to be. After Michael's betrayal, such genuine regard felt simultaneously precious and terrifying. As my surgery date approached, my circle of support mobilized with impressive efficiency. Diane organized a meal delivery schedule. My parents arranged to stay in my guest room for the first week of recovery. Evelyn insisted on handling transportation to follow-up appointments. Even my brother James, typically absorbed in his own busy family life, offered to fly in from Denver if needed. The outpouring of support contrasted sharply with my imagined isolation following the divorce. I had feared abandonment, assumed many friendships would dissolve in the awkwardness of taking sides. Instead, I discovered connections stronger than expected, loyalty deeper than hoped. Walter, too, found his place in this support network, offering to manage library emergencies that might arise during my absence, volunteering to stock my freezer with homemade soups, suggesting audiobooks to enjoy during recovery when reading might be physically uncomfortable. The night before surgery, as I methodically packed my hospital bag according to the checklist provided by my surgeon, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Olivia Hayes speaking," I answered distractedly, counting pairs of socks. "Olivia, it's Michael." I froze, sock in hand, momentarily speechless. He hadn't contacted me directly since the divorce was finalized. "Why are you calling?" I asked when I found my voice, keeping my tone carefully neutral. He hesitated, an uncharacteristic uncertainty in his silence. "I heard about your surgery tomorrow. The BRCA diagnosis. I wanted to wish you well." My first instinct was anger. How dare he intrude on this vulnerable moment? What right did he have to express concern after his betrayal? But beneath the anger lay confusion. How had he even known? "How did you hear about my surgery?" I asked stiffly. Another pause. "Emma told me. She's been worried about you." Of course. The genetic connection that had forced our limited communication about the BRCA mutation. "I see," I said, still processing the unexpected contact. "Well, thank you for your concern, but it's unnecessary. I have plenty of support." "I'm sure you do," he agreed quickly. "I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I remember how anxious you were before your knee surgery years ago. How you couldn't sleep the night before. I don't know what I thought." The reference to our shared past, to his knowledge of my medical anxieties, struck an unexpected chord. For a brief moment, the Michael on the phone sounded like the husband I'd known, the man who had held me through nights of pre-surgical insomnia, who had memorized my medication schedules when I was too foggy from anesthesia to manage them myself. "I appreciate the thought," I said finally, softening slightly, "but I'm doing fine." "Really?" "Good," he said, sounding relieved. "That's good." "And Olivia?" "Yes?" "For what it's worth, I've never seen you look as beautiful as you did at the gala last month. You seemed radiant, like you found your way to something better." The compliment caught me off guard, sincere in a way I hadn't expected. Before I could formulate a response, he continued, "I should let you go. Just, good luck tomorrow. I'll be thinking of you." The call ended, leaving me standing in my bedroom with a single sock still clutched in my hand, emotions tumbling through me like clothes in a dryer, anger, confusion, a traitorous flicker of warmth at his concern, frustration at myself for feeling anything but indifference. I finished packing mechanically, forcing Michael from my thoughts. Tomorrow was too important to waste emotional energy on the past. My future, my health, my life required full attention now. Surgery proceeded exactly as planned. Bilateral mastectomy with immediate reconstruction, clean margins, no complications. I awoke groggy but relieved, surrounded by the beeping monitors and hushed efficiency of the recovery room. The first face I saw clearly belonged to my mother, her usually composed features tight with worry that relaxed as I blinked awake. "There you are," she said softly. "Everything went perfectly. The surgeon just spoke with us." "Good," I managed, my throat dry from the breathing tube. The following days passed in a blur of pain management, careful movements, drain monitoring, and brief, exhausting visits from my support network. My parents took shifts at the hospital, one always present while the other rested at my house. Diane appeared daily with small gifts: luxurious hand cream, soft socks, a tablet loaded with movies, and fierce cheerleading for each milestone of recovery. Walter sent flowers and called each evening, his voice a soothing presence as I navigated the discomfort and limitations of early healing. He never pushed to visit in person, understanding instinctively that I might not want to be seen in such a vulnerable state. Evelyn arrived on my third day, bearing homemade chicken soup, clearly not her own cooking given its excellence, and a no-nonsense attitude that somehow made the medical indignities easier to bear. "Michael asked about you," she mentioned casually as she arranged the soup container in my hospital room mini-fridge. "I told him you were recovering well, but that he should direct his inquiries elsewhere in the future." I smiled weakly at her protective instinct. "He called me the night before surgery, actually." Evelyn's eyebrows rose. "Did he? What did he want? Just to wish me well, apparently." I adjusted my position carefully, wincing as the movement pulled at my surgical sites. "It was unexpected." Her non-committal response held volumes. "What?" I pressed. She arranged my pillows with efficient movements. "Nothing. Simply observing that my son occasionally demonstrates he's not entirely devoid of decent instincts. It's rare enough to be noteworthy." Her dry assessment made me laugh, then immediately regret it as pain flared across my chest. "Don't make me laugh," I groaned. "It hurts too much." "Noted," she said with a small smile, though recovery might be rather grim without occasional humor. She was right, of course. The coming weeks would be challenging, physically uncomfortable, emotionally taxing, requiring patience I wasn't certain I possessed. Yet the hardest part, the decision, the preparation, the surgery itself, was behind me. Each day would bring incremental improvement, gradual return to normalcy. I was discharged on the 5th day, returning to a home transformed by careful preparations. My bedroom had been rearranged to minimize reaching, with essentials placed at accessible heights. Diane had organized a command center on my nightstand, medications arranged by schedule, water bottle, tissues, phone charger, emergency contact list. My refrigerator was stocked with easy meals, my freezer filled with homemade options from the meal train Diane had organized. Recovery proceeded along the expected timeline, initially challenging, gradually improving. Pain medication doses decreased. Surgical drains were removed. Tentative movements became more confident. By the 3rd week, I was taking short walks around the neighborhood, carefully monitored by whoever was on Olivia duty that day. "You know," I said to Diane during one such walk, "I think there's been more traffic through my house in the past month than in the entire 5 years before." She smiled. "Get used to it. We've all discovered you're actually pleasant company when you're not hiding in your library fortress." "I do not hide," I protested. "You absolutely do," she countered affectionately. "Or did, anyway. Since the divorce, you've been more accessible, more present. It suits you." Her observation gave me pause. Had I been hiding before? Retreating into work and routine to avoid confronting the quiet dissatisfaction in my marriage? The thought was uncomfortable but held a ring of truth I couldn't dismiss. As I continued healing physically, I found myself contemplating this emotional revelation. My marriage to Michael had been comfortable, stable, but perhaps lacking the vitality I'd convinced myself wasn't important. We'd settled into patterns that neither challenged nor nurtured growth, coexisting rather than truly engaging. The realization didn't excuse his betrayal, but it offered new perspective on the years preceding it. Perhaps we had both been hiding in different ways, avoiding the harder work of genuine connection. By the 6th week post-surgery, my life began returning to something resembling normalcy. I was cleared to drive, to lift moderately heavy objects, to gradually resume regular activities. My parents returned to their own home, though they called daily. The meal deliveries tapered off as I regained the ability to cook for myself. Diane's visits decreased from daily to every few days. Walter remained a steady presence throughout, calling regularly, visiting when invited, never pressuring for more than I could give. As my physical healing progressed, our relationship cautiously deepened. A gentle kiss goodbye became a lingering embrace. Conversations ventured into more personal territory. The comfortable companionship evolved into something warmer, more promising. "I'd like to cook dinner for you," I offered one evening as we finished a walk around the neighborhood pond. "Saturday, perhaps?" His smile was immediate and pleased. "I'd love that. Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself," I replied. "It's time I returned some of the kindness you've shown me these past weeks." The dinner invitation represented more than simple reciprocity. It was an acknowledgement that I was ready to move forward, to explore possibilities beyond friendship. Walter seemed to understand the significance, arriving Saturday evening with obvious care, taken with his appearance and a bottle of excellent wine. "You look wonderful," he said as I welcomed him inside. "Truly radiant." I felt self-conscious under his admiring gaze. My body was still healing, still adjusting to its new contours. The reconstruction had been successful from a medical perspective, but I remained acutely aware of the changes, the scars still pink and tender beneath my clothing. "Thank you," I managed, leading him to the kitchen where preparations for coq au vin were underway. "I hope you like French cuisine." "I like anything I don't have to cook myself," he assured me with a chuckle. "But yes, I'm particularly fond of French cooking." The evening unfolded with comfortable ease, conversation flowing naturally as we moved from kitchen to dining room, sharing the meal I'd prepared and the wine he'd brought. Walter spoke of his upcoming sabbatical plans, a research project focused on post-war reconstruction efforts in Europe. I described the library's expansion initiatives, the grant proposals I'd been developing during my recovery. After dinner, we settled in the living room with coffee, sitting closer than strictly necessary on the sofa I'd purchased to replace Michael's leather monstrosity. The proximity felt both thrilling and terrifying, a stark reminder of how vulnerable I still was, how much I feared being hurt again. Walter seemed to sense my anxiety, covering my hand with his own in a gesture meant to comfort rather than advance. "We can go as slowly as you need," he said softly. "I'm not going anywhere, Olivia." The simple promise, delivered without pressure or expectation, broke something open inside me. Tears welled unexpectedly, spilling before I could control them. "I'm sorry," I managed, embarrassed by the emotional display. "I don't know why I'm crying." "I do," he said gently, offering a handkerchief he produced from his pocket like a man from another era. "You've been through extraordinary challenges this past year. Divorce, betrayal, major surgery. You've handled it all with remarkable strength. But strength doesn't mean the hurt isn't there." His understanding only made the tears flow faster. "I'm terrified," I admitted, voicing the fear I'd barely acknowledged to myself. Terrified of trusting again, of being vulnerable, of being hurt. Walter nodded, his expression solemn. "Of course you are. That's entirely reasonable given what you've experienced. I would be concerned if you weren't cautious." He shifted slightly, angling to face me more directly. "But I hope you know I would never deliberately hurt you, Olivia. I value what's growing between us too much to risk it with carelessness or deception." "Michael probably said similar things once," I pointed out, dabbing at my eyes with his handkerchief. "I'm sure he did," Walter acknowledged. "And he likely meant them at the time. I can't promise I'm fundamentally different or better than other men who've made such promises. I can only promise that I understand the precious nature of trust, especially trust that's been rebuilt after betrayal." His honesty, the absence of grand declarations or excessive promises, reassured me more than flowery vows could have. Walter wasn't offering guarantees of perfect behavior or eternal devotion. He was offering authentic presence, conscious care, mindful engagement. "Thank you," I said softly, "for understanding, for being patient." His smile warmed his entire face. "Patience comes easily when the reward is time with you." The simple compliment brought heat to my cheeks. "Careful, Professor. That almost sounds like a line." He laughed, the tension of the moment breaking. "An occupational hazard of teaching literature for decades. One absorbs a certain florid quality of expression." As the evening continued, we carefully navigated the delicate boundary between friendship and something deeper. When Walter finally prepared to leave, he hesitated at the door, his expression questioning. Understanding his silent request, I stepped closer, tilting my face up to his, a clear invitation he accepted with gentle reverence. The kiss was tender, unhurried, a conversation rather than a demand. When we separated, his eyes held mine with quiet intensity. "Good night, Olivia," he said softly. "Thank you for dinner. And for trusting me, even a little." After he left, I stood in the quiet house, fingers touching my lips where his had been, processing the complex emotions swirling through me. Fear, yes, but also hope. Caution, but also anticipation. The lingering damage from Michael's betrayal hadn't disappeared, but it had receded enough to allow new possibilities to take root. The following week brought my return to work at the library, initially part-time, gradually increasing to full hours as my stamina improved. The structured routine provided welcome normality after weeks of recovery, while my growing relationship with Walter added a new dimension to my rebuilding life. We settled into a comfortable pattern: dinner twice weekly, occasional cultural outings, phone conversations most evenings we weren't together. Physical intimacy progressed slowly, limited by both my surgical recovery and my emotional caution. Walter never pressured for more than I was ready to give, his patience seemingly inexhaustible. October arrived with brilliant foliage and crisp mornings, marking a full year since Michael's confession had shattered my world. The anniversary passed without the emotional devastation I'd feared, noted but not debilitating. I spent the evening with Diane and Ben, acknowledging the significance of the date without allowing it to dominate our conversation. "A year ago, you couldn't imagine surviving this," Diane observed as we shared dessert. "Now look at you, thriving, dating a handsome professor, rocking that new haircut." I touched my recently shortened hair self-consciously. The chin-length bob had been a post-recovery impulse, a physical manifestation of my internal changes. "I'm not sure about thriving," I demurred. "But I'm definitely surviving." "False modesty doesn't suit you," she countered. "You've rebuilt your life from scratch. That's not mere survival, that's triumph." Her assessment was hyperbolic, but contained enough truth to make me consider my journey more objectively. I had emerged from the wreckage stronger than anticipated, more resilient than I'd believed possible. The woman I'd become, independent, determined, increasingly confident, bore little resemblance to the shell-shocked victim who'd stood in her kitchen a year ago as her husband confessed to loving her sister. The healing wasn't complete. Certain wounds remained tender. Unexpected reminders of my marriage still had power to sting. Dreams occasionally replayed old hurts. Trust remained a fragile work in progress. But the trajectory was unmistakably positive, the progress undeniable. November brought the final phase of my reconstructive process, minor revisionary surgery that completed my physical recovery. Walter drove me to the outpatient procedure, waited patiently during the brief operation, and escorted me home with gentle solicitude. "You don't have to stay," I protested as he settled me on the sofa with pillows, water, and medication within easy reach. "This recovery is much simpler than the first surgery." "I know I don't have to," he replied, arranging a throw blanket over my legs. "I want to. Unless you'd prefer solitude?" The offer to leave if I wanted space was typical of his consideration, always careful not to impose, to respect my autonomy. "No," I admitted. "I'd like you to stay." He smiled, settling into the armchair adjacent to my sofa position. "Then I'll stay." As evening approached, I insisted he help himself to the lasagna Diane had delivered the previous day, promising to join him at the table despite my groggy state. We ate together in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by his observations about his students or my comments about upcoming library events. The domesticity of the moment struck me suddenly, this simple shared meal, the easy companionship, the unspoken understanding. It felt both familiar and entirely new, reminding me of early years with Michael while being fundamentally different in its mindful appreciation. "Penny for your thoughts?" Walter said, noticing my contemplative expression. "I was just thinking how nice this is," I replied honestly. "Simple moments like this. They're easy to take for granted until they're gone." He nodded, understanding immediately. "The ordinary miracles of daily life. Sharing a meal, comfortable silence, being seen and known by another person." "Exactly," I agreed, touched by his intuitive grasp of my meaning. Later, as post-surgical fatigue overtook me, Walter helped me to bed with practical efficiency, nothing presumptuous or awkward in his assistance. At my door, he prepared to retreat to the guest room we'd arranged for his overnight stay. "Walter," I said impulsively, "would you stay with me? Just to sleep, I mean. I'd like not to be alone tonight." Surprise flickered briefly across his features, followed by gentle understanding. "Of course, if you're sure." The weight of another person in my bed, the sound of someone else's breathing, the warmth of another body nearby, felt simultaneously strange and comforting. We maintained a careful distance, nothing more intimate than his hand lightly holding mine across the space between us, but the simple presence was profoundly reassuring. I drifted to sleep with his steady breathing as counterpoint to my own, a harmony I had missed without fully acknowledging the absence. Morning brought clarity with its pale November sunlight. As Walter prepared breakfast in my kitchen, moving with surprising confidence through cabinets and refrigerator, I watched from the doorway, contemplating the steadily growing place he occupied in my life. "You're staring," he observed without turning around, spatula maneuvering eggs with practiced skill. "Is it because I'm ruining your breakfast or because I look particularly dashing in morning light?" I laughed, the sound free and unguarded. "Neither. I was just thinking how naturally you fit here, in my kitchen, in my life." He turned then, his expression serious despite his light tone moments before. "Is that a good observation or a concerning one?" "Good," I assured him. "Surprising, but good." His smile returned, warm and genuine. "I'm glad. Because I've been thinking the same thing about you, how naturally you fit in my life, how much brighter everything seems when you're in it." The simple declaration, delivered without dramatic gesture or elaborate language, touched me deeply. Walter's straightforward honesty had become one of the qualities I valued most, a sharp contrast to the complex deceptions that had ended my marriage. "I think I might be falling in love with you," I admitted quietly, the words escaping before I could analyze or censor them. Walter set down the spatula and crossed the kitchen to where I stood, taking my hands in his. "Then we're experiencing the same remarkable phenomenon," he said softly. "Because I'm quite certain I'm falling in love with you, Olivia Hayes." The kiss that followed was different from our previous careful exchanges, deeper, more certain, a mutual acknowledgement of shifting boundaries and growing trust. When we separated, his eyes held mine with tender intensity. "The eggs are burning," I whispered, smiling. "Worth it," he declared, returning to rescue our smoking breakfast. As November gave way to December, our relationship deepened further. Walter integrated seamlessly into my holiday plans, accompanying me to my parents' Thanksgiving dinner, helping select and decorate a Christmas tree for my living room, attending the library's annual staff celebration as my official +1. The approaching holidays brought inevitable confrontation with another facet of my new reality, navigating family gatherings with the Emma-shaped hole in my life. Despite my parents' careful arrangements to ensure we wouldn't attend the same events, her absence remained a palpable presence, a negative space defined by what was missing. "Do you ever think about reconciling with her?" my mother asked carefully during a pre-Christmas shopping trip. "Not forgetting or excusing what she did, but perhaps finding a way forward?" The question shouldn't have surprised me. My mother had always been the peacemaker, the one who believed family bonds could survive any strain. Still, I found myself momentarily speechless. "No," I answered finally, examining a potential gift for Walter rather than meeting her eyes. "I don't think that's possible. Emma asks about you, you know," she continued, her tone deliberately casual. "She regrets what happened. Deeply." "I'm sure she does," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. "Especially now that it's apparently not working out with Michael." My mother sighed, abandoning the pretense of shopping to face me directly. "They separated 2 months ago. She moved back to her apartment. I thought you might have heard." I hadn't heard. Despite the gala confrontation I'd witnessed and the rumors of discord, I had assumed they remained together, their grand passion worth the devastation it had caused. "I didn't know," I admitted, processing this new information. "But it doesn't change anything, Mom. What they did can't be undone." "Of course not," she agreed quickly. "I would never suggest forgetting or minimizing the hurt they caused. I hate seeing my family fractured like this, especially during the holidays." The pain in her voice softened my defensive posture. My parents were in an impossible position, loving 2 daughters who could no longer be in the same room, navigating divided loyalties and separate celebrations. "I'm sorry it's difficult for you and Dad," I said sincerely, "but I'm not ready to see her." I don't know if I'll ever be ready. My mother nodded, accepting my position without further argument. I understand, honey. We'll continue as we have been. I just wanted you to know the door is open, if you ever change your mind. The revelation about Michael and Emma's separation followed me through the remainder of the shopping trip and into the evening. I found myself distracted during dinner with Walter, my thoughts circling around this unexpected development. Something's bothering you, he observed as we washed dishes together afterward. Would you like to talk about it? I hesitated, uncertain whether discussing Michael and Emma would introduce unwelcome tension into our evening. But the gentle concern in Walter's expression encouraged honesty. My mother told me today that Michael and Emma have separated, I explained, handing him a plate to dry. Apparently it happened 2 months ago. I see, he replied carefully, giving the plate more attention than it required. How do you feel about that? I don't know, I admitted. Vindicated, I suppose? They destroyed my marriage for a relationship that couldn't even last a year. Walter nodded, accepting my assessment without judgment. That's understandable. Does it change anything for you? The question pierced through my superficial reaction to the deeper implications. Did their separation change anything? Did it matter that their relationship had failed? Did it make the betrayal any less painful or consequential? No, I said finally. It doesn't change what they did. It doesn't erase the past year. It doesn't make me want to reconcile with either of them. But, Walter prompted gently, sensing my unspoken reservation. But, I continued, searching for words to express the complicated emotions surfacing, part of me had constructed this narrative where they lived happily ever after, justifying what they did with the permanence of their love. Their breakup disrupts that story. It makes everything they did even more pointless, more wasteful. Walter dried his hands and leaned against the counter, considering my words. I understand. There's a certain tragic logic if they sacrificed everything for an enduring love. Without that ending, the entire story changes meaning. His insight, as always, cut to the heart of my confusion. Exactly. If they couldn't even make it work, then what was the point of all that pain? What was destroyed, my marriage, my relationship with my sister, our family harmony, was destroyed for nothing. Not nothing, Walter corrected gently. It led you here to this new life you've created. To us. The simple observation shifted my perspective. He was right. The devastating events of the past year had catalyzed profound changes, many ultimately positive. Without Michael's betrayal, I would still be in a marriage that had quietly hollowed out without my full awareness. I would never have discovered my capacity for resilience, never have rebuilt my life on my own terms, never have met Walter. You're right, I acknowledged, reaching for his hand. Good things have come from terrible circumstances. I wouldn't choose the path again, but I'm grateful for where it led. He squeezed my hand, his eyes warm with understanding. The human heart is remarkable in its capacity to find meaning in suffering, to create beauty from ashes. The professor emerges, I teased gently, lightening the moment. Always ready with a poetic observation. He smiled, accepting the gentle ribbing. Occupational hazard, I'm afraid. Years of literature leave their mark. The conversation shifted to lighter topics as we finished cleaning the kitchen, but the revelation about Michael and Emma and Walter's insightful reframing continued to resonate in the following days. I found myself considering the complex tapestry of consequences that had unfolded from that October evening when Michael had spoken those 12 devastating words. Christmas arrived with unexpected peacefulness. I spent Christmas Eve with Walter at a concert of medieval carols, then Christmas morning opened gifts with him before joining my parents for late breakfast. The afternoon brought Diane and Ben's annual open house, followed by quiet evening reflection at home, alone by choice, savoring the stillness after a day of social engagement. As I sat by my decorated tree, nursing a glass of wine and watching lights twinkle in the darkness, my phone chimed with a text message. Walter, I assumed, sending a goodnight greeting as had become our custom when apart. Instead, Michael's name appeared on the screen. Michael, Merry Christmas, Olivia. I hope today brought you joy. You deserve it. The unexpected contact stirred complicated emotions, irritation at the intrusion, confusion about his motives, a strange, distant ache for the shared Christmases of our past. I debated ignoring the message but found myself responding before fully considering the wisdom of engagement. Me, thank you. Merry Christmas to you as well. His reply came almost immediately. Michael, I've been thinking about you today. About all our Christmases together. I miss your cinnamon rolls and the way you always found the perfect gifts. The message felt like dangerous territory, nostalgic, personal, edging toward intimate. I kept my response deliberately neutral. Me. That's in the past now. We've both moved forward. Michael, have we? I'm not sure I have. Emma and I ended things months ago. Nothing has felt right since I left you. Biggest mistake of my life. I stared at the screen in disbelief, anger flaring hot and sudden. After everything, after the betrayal, the lies, the legal battles, the financial maneuvering, he had the audacity to suggest regret? To hint at reconciliation after I'd finally rebuilt my life? Me. Don't contact me again, Michael. We have nothing to discuss. I blocked his number immediately after sending the response, hands shaking with suppressed emotion. The calm contentment of my Christmas evening had evaporated, replaced by turbulent anger and unwelcome memories. Unable to settle back into peaceful reflection, I called the one person I knew would understand without judgment. Olivia? Diane answered, concern evident in her voice. Is everything okay? Michael texted me, I said without preamble. Nostalgic Christmas memories followed by biggest mistake of my life after mentioning he and Emma broke up. That absolute jackass, she hissed, immediately protective. What did you say? Told him not to contact me again and blocked his number, I reported, already feeling calmer simply sharing the incident. But it rattled me more than it should have. Of course it did, she soothed. He blindsided you with emotional manipulation on Christmas, for God's sake. That's worthy of some rattling. Her validation helped settle my racing thoughts. I don't understand why he'd reach out now. What could he possibly hope to accomplish? He's alone on Christmas, probably drinking, definitely feeling sorry for himself, Diane analyzed shrewdly. His grand passion with your sister imploded. His mother barely speaks to him. His reputation took a hit in certain circles. He's looking back at the comfortable life he threw away and thinking maybe he can sweet-talk his way back into it. Her assessment aligned with my own suspicions, but hearing it articulated so bluntly brought clarity. As if I would ever consider taking him back, I said, the very idea suddenly ludicrous. Exactly, Diane affirmed. But men like Michael can't imagine a world where they don't get what they want eventually. His ego requires believing you're still pining for him, just waiting for him to realize his mistake and return. The conversation continued, Diane's righteous indignation on my behalf gradually restoring my equilibrium. By the time we hung up, I had regained perspective. Michael's text represented nothing more significant than his own regrets and self-absorption, not a threat to my hard-won peace. The following morning, I shared the incident with Walter during our planned breakfast. His reaction was measured, concerned for my emotional well-being, but neither possessively angry nor dismissively casual. How do you feel about it now, with some distance? He asked, refilling my coffee cup. Annoyed, I admitted, but also validated. In a strange way, not because I want him back, I absolutely don't, but because his regret confirms I wasn't the problem in our marriage. His choices were. Walter nodded thoughtfully. That's a healthy perspective. Recognition without re-engagement. Besides, I continued, smiling over my coffee, my life is full with much better things now. His answering smile warmed me more than the coffee ever could. As is mine, Olivia. As is mine. The remainder of the holiday season passed without further disruption. Michael's attempted contact, while momentarily unsettling, ultimately reinforced rather than undermined my confidence in the new life I was building. His regret was not my responsibility, his loneliness not my problem to solve. New Year's Eve found me at Walter's home for the first time, a charming craftsman bungalow near the university filled with books, comfortable furniture, and evidence of his academic life. I'd been hesitant to enter his personal space, worried about the intimacy it represented, but the evening unfolded with natural ease. We cooked together in his kitchen, opened a bottle of champagne well before midnight, and talked for hours about everything and nothing. His upcoming sabbatical research, my plans for the library's community outreach, shared memories of New Year's past, hopes for the one approaching. As midnight neared, Walter turned on the television to watch the traditional Times Square celebration, pulling me close on his comfortable sofa. Any resolutions for the new year? He asked as the countdown began. I considered the question seriously. To live more presently, to trust more openly, to let go of what I can't control. Ambitious, he observed with a smile. And admirable. What about you? I asked as the glittering ball began its descent on the screen. Just one, he replied, his expression suddenly serious. To love you better each day than the day before. The simple declaration, delivered without fanfare or elaborate gesture, touched me deeply. Before I could respond, the countdown reached 0, cheers erupted from the television, and Walter leaned in to kiss me with gentle reverence. Happy New Year, Olivia, he whispered against my lips. Happy New Year, Walter, I replied, allowing myself to fully embrace the promise of new beginnings, of continued healing, of love carefully rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. As January unfolded, bringing a new year and the 15-month anniversary of my divorce, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. The devastation that had once seemed insurmountable had gradually transformed into the foundation for a different kind of life, one built on deeper self-knowledge, more authentic connections, and a hard-won appreciation for my own resilience. The scars remained, both physical from my surgery and emotional from Michael and Emma's betrayal. But scars, I had learned, were not merely markers of past wounds. They were evidence of healing, of survival, of the body and heart's remarkable capacity to repair themselves. One snowy evening in late January, as Walter and I walked arm in arm through the park near my home, he stopped suddenly beneath a streetlight, snowflakes catching in his silver-streaked hair. I love you, Olivia, he said simply. I should have said it properly before now. I love you. And I want to build a life with you, however that looks, whatever pace feels right, not to replace what you lost, but to create something new together. I studied his face in the golden glow of the streetlight, the kindness in his eyes, the sincerity in his expression, the nervous hope as he awaited my response. Here was a man who had seen me at my most vulnerable, who had witnessed my struggle to rebuild, who understood the complex legacy of betrayal that traveled with me. And he loved me anyway, not despite my wounds but including them as part of the woman I had become. I love you too, I replied, the words surprisingly easy after months of careful emotional navigation. And I would like very much to build something new with you. His smile was radiant as he pulled me closer, snowflakes settling on our shoulders as we sealed this new understanding with a kiss full of promise and possibility. We continued our walk home through gently falling snow, discussing not specific plans or timelines, but the shared values that would guide whatever future we created: honesty, respect, patience, appreciation for the complex journeys that had brought us together at this point in our lives. That night, as Walter slept peacefully beside me, our relationship having gradually, naturally evolved to include physical intimacy, I found myself awake, watching snowflakes drift past my bedroom window. I thought of Michael's confession 15 months earlier, of the kitchen floor scattered with broken ceramic, of the woman I had been then, devastated, disbelieving, certain her life was effectively over at 47. I could never have imagined in those dark moments the path that lay ahead, the fierce legal battle, the medical challenges, the unexpected allies, the gradual rebuilding, the surprising joy of discovering my own strength and Walter's steadfast heart. After 25 years, he had left me for my sister. I had taken everything in the divorce. But the greatest victory wasn't the financial settlement or the properties, or even the satisfaction of watching their relationship crumble as quickly as it had formed. The true victory was this: I had reclaimed myself. I had rebuilt a life worth living. I had found the courage to love again, not with blind trust, but with open eyes and a heart made wiser by pain. As snow continued to fall outside my window, I turned toward Walter's sleeping form, allowing myself to fully embrace the truth that had been gradually emerging over these difficult, transformative months. Sometimes the end of one story is simply the beginning of a better one.